Na 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 na. I've got a theme song. My name is Brad Stein. This is Brad Stein Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. I'm Brad Stein. My sidekick's son is Wyatt Stein, and today we have a very special guest, somebody that is kind of eclectic, unique, somebody you might probably not see on most Christian broadcasts. His name, Michael Weber. He is a special effects consultant for major motion pictures that you have seen, have heard about. The special effects that allow a magical thing to happen to the actor or whatever that isn't using CGI. He creates it and created it with his late partner, Ricky Jay, the famous magician actor. His name's Michael Weber. He's also a skeptic. He's not a Christ follower, but we had some conversations about the transcendent, about the ideas of God. Remember, on Brad Stein Has Issues, we want people that aren't believers as well as people that are. We want people that are deeply committed to the biblical worldview, and we want people that consider it just one of many. Because that makes for two things: a really interesting conversation, but number two, it makes for the potential for you to see how you can engage people who disagree with you and see if you can find some common ground, and if you can find perhaps some ways to make them rethink their point of view. Or maybe they're going to catch you and you don't know what to do. You need to go home and study too. So this is going to be a great interview, and I'm just going to say it up front. It's a very personal interview. And what I mean is that Michael Weber, and if you are not in the sleight-of-hand, prestidigitation, legerdemain, conjuring, illusionist, David Blaine meets David Copperfield world, if that's not something you're involved with personally, it's a very unique subculture, then his name probably will have escaped you. It won't be somebody that you would have heard of or thought about. But in that community of the best, most famous magicians in the world, this man is an icon. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy. And he also is an old friend. He's a guy that I first met in the very early 80s in Southern California when I first started my career as a professional magician. I did that before I did any performance art and getting paid. It was as a magician. So I met him then and have known him ever since. And though we've gone our separate ways, and certainly philosophically we've gone our separate ways, we're still friends. We still are cordial. He's an interesting guy, and he's a challenge to grapple with. And that's what makes it important to hear this. So I think in so many levels, guys, even though you're going to hear a lot of self-indulgence as I just kind of reminisce with him about the life that I had so many years ago, maybe you'll find it interesting because it is so personal. Even some areas where him and I interacted when it came to a book that he wrote and how I was a little bit uniquely involved in that book that he didn't know. And so that's a story you're going to hear. So anyways, it's going to be an amazing, amazing interview, and I think you'll find it fascinating. It's a really long one, much longer than I expected. So the part that we do up front, the banter, so to speak, with Wyatt, it's going to be a little shorter, only about 30 minutes, only to save you guys having to sit through us for 45 minutes and then have this other thing. Now, I know a lot of you turn it off and watch it later, and that, God bless you. And some of you watch it in your own time, and that's the beauty of social media. You can watch it on your own time. But nevertheless, for those of you who stick around and watch till the end, and it's a handful of my special ones, it's a longer one, but I hope you find it fascinating. Wyatt certain did. If you are tuning in for the first time, and if you are, I want you to know that God likes to send locusts your way. He's so frustrated when you're not and haven't been subscribing to Brad Stein Has Issues on YouTube and hitting the notification button. But I always go to God and say, have mercy on their soul. They know not what they do. And so that also means they know not who I am. I'm a professional comedian. I'm known as God's Comic. New Yorker gave me that in 2004. But I also have a son that I created from whole cloth. He exuded from my loins. His name is Wyatt Stein. Wyatt, are you anywhere to be found today behind your bureaucracy of buttons?
Nope, I am a man of mystery.
So you've gone back into the mystery mode. If you're just tuning in, for about 3 years when Wyatt was sort of interacting with me, he was never on camera. You would just see sort of his hand show up because he had to fix an iPad that he had neglected to prepare for me to
That
use.
you couldn't operate to save your life.
Or perhaps nobody can hear me because he didn't push a button that was right in front of him that said, push this button if you want to hear your dad.
I did that as a service to the audience.
Yes. So if you're going to zing me,
What? Give you a warning
on
beforehand?
guard, my friend. On guard.
Oh, come on. You've seen this coming for years.
I did. Wyatt, I would love to. Maybe we'll have a special episode one of these days where you are behind the desk and I run your end, and I wouldn't know how to do that, so I don't know how we'll pull that off.
I'm pretty sure it would just be 45 minutes of dead silence on our end.
Well, as long as I know how to push the button and talk back to you, but it might be fun just to
You
mix it.
didn't know how to open up YouTube on an iPod.
You know what we could do is we could have you at the desk, and we'll do our same stuff like we're doing right now, except you'll be here instead of there, and I'll be there. I don't know if we could pull it off because I don't know if once the show starts, if you have any other buttons you have to push, and so obviously I'd be terrible at it. But if that's not the case, it just might be something fun.
It'll harken back to the old times when we had no idea what we're doing.
Yes.
Unlike now, where we have no idea what we're doing.
But now we're doing that on a professional level.
Yes,
and that
we are
puts it-
professional screw-ups now.
Yeah, and I love it that way. You know, speaking of professional screw-ups, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but years ago they created a sport called football.
Is it the one that does or doesn't require your feet?
For the most part, no feet are involved other than
Interesting.
to run or walk. The beautiful thing about football is kind of what you referenced, but the name is a single word, but it's two words that are combined. Maybe there's a term for that.
Yeah, a word.
But like if you have two words that separately are words, but if you put them together, it's one word. Is there a name for that too?
You know what? Given how
Has to be.
English loves making words out of weird concepts, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, so
I don't know what it is, though.
Yeah,
Would
Yeah.
you like me to look it up?
well, you should, because that's what Joe Rogan's guy would have done. And I'm like right behind. I'm just nipping at his heels, making this incredible Brad Stein has this show explode. But anyways, they have a word called football, and what I find interesting about the word football is that it references, I guess, the most popular sport in the United States, right? But neither of the two words actually
Got it. It's a compound word.
compound word.
Compound word, yep.
So there you go. I was hoping you'd know that from the get. I knew it. I just wanted to see if you'd know it and could figure it out without looking it up. But never mind. Google to the rescue. Thanks to Google, you give the illusion of having insight. But listen, football, as you just mentioned, foot is rarely used. I mean, yes, you run, there's your foot. But you would think football would be you kick, because in Europe, they call football, but we call it soccer. So when we watch soccer here over in Europe, which is where it came from, so really they should have the permission to decide to call it what they want. But only in America, we say, you know what, thanks for the game. It's like fourth or fifth on our interest level, and we're going to rename it. But other than that, thanks for the game. It's, I think, the most popular game in the world, by the way. Nevertheless, we renamed it soccer. But football, in our sport, rarely uses your foot. You do kick off, so that uses it. You do an extra point, that's a kickoff. You can do a drop kick for like 3 points, some odd thing that rarely ever happens. But for the most part, other than running, but see, every sport you run, and they don't call it foot tennis.
I'm sorry, every sport you run?
Pretty much, or you know, or at least move.
Swimming.
You run with your little flappy feet.
And this Jesus is competing. I don't think you run when you're doing that one.
With your little flappy feet. You're running kind of through the water, which, by the way, if you didn't know this, water is not wet. So I just thought you should know that.
Yeah, it isn't.
no.
I've made out this point many times.
You've gone.
Water is not wet by definition.
I know. I understand that. Because if it was a molecule layer
No,
of,
you don't get to use my explanation and act like you invented it.
well,
Water isn't intrinsically wet.
Okay, what is
So wet means to cover with a thin layer of liquid.
okay.
That's not an objective property of water because there are instances where you don't have water on covering water.
Well,
For
like-
instance, an atom-thick layer of water would not have any water over itself and therefore would be an example of water not being wet.
So would you say that if water was evaporating on a hot rock, that final instance before it goes invisible is like it evaporated down to like one molecule?
Kinda. I mean, evaporation doesn't really get rid of the water. It just makes the molecules less bound.
But
to
it's
each
not
other.
there anymore on the rock. We are
No.
dealing with the layers of water because the
Yeah.
ocean is a bunch of molecular layers
Yes.
of water, so it's wet, basically.
Well, the ocean is wet, but water is not inherently wet.
Okay, well, anyways, we've had this discussion before.
And I will die on this hill, this wet hill.
Well, as long as you don't die by drowning, which would be super ironic.
Honestly, I'm on a hill. If I die by drowning, then I feel sorry for everyone else.
Right.
They're probably freaking Mariana's Trench at this point.
It's an arc thing at this point. They're looking for Noah. Listen, so back to football. So foot is very rarely used, hardly ever used, virtually not used. Ball is used on every play except the shape of a football isn't a ball. It's like, I don't even know what you call it, a lemon shaped. It's lemon shaped ball. So it's not a ball. So it's not a foot or a ball or hardly ever uses the foot, and it never uses a ball because it's not a ball because it's not round. And I think the definition of ball would be round, right? There's no square ball, right? There's no triangular ball, right? And when isn't ball a synonym for spherical or round?
Kind of is. But it's hard to say if that's just because most balls are spherical or if there's some other reason. But yeah.
I don't know of any other ball referenced as a ball that isn't ball shaped except foot.
Gotta be one. It's gotta be one.
If I were you, I would surreptitiously. I would
Would a wiffle ball count? The ones with like the holes in it? Because technically,
round.
but that's not a shape though, because of the holes, is it?
Yeah, it's still round. It just has holes in that
Yeah,
particular
but
sphere.
doesn't the hole disqualify it as being technically a shape? Because like you can't have curves in a shape. That's not a thing.
I don't. Wyatt, we're losing the audience by like.
Losing the audience?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? We'd need to have an audience to lose.
Well, listen, here's what I was going to talk. Speaking of an audience to lose, last night as we taped this, and I probably didn't need to say that, but I did, just to give you a reference point to be topical, because topical sells, my friend. Topical sells. Super Bowl was last night. It's super. It's bowl-shaped, but no foot or ball is involved except for the football in the game of football, by which we've already proven was an erroneous naming of it. But nevertheless, it was on. And I watched exactly 0 seconds of it I didn't watch one tiny, stinking, one layer of molecules of not even being wetness of the Super Bowl. Do you know why?
I mean, I didn't even know the Super Bowl happened yesterday.
That's my son.
I'm guessing because it just doesn't mean anything to you.
Because we, as a team of a podcast that's on Salem Life Audio Network.
Gotta
that's on
plug the
Spotify.
network.
Yeah, it's on Spotify. It's on Apple Tunes. It's on YouTube. Brad Sinise Issues channel. Clips are shown on Instagram and sometimes on my Facebook fan page. The last thing you and I need to be is aware of what's happening on Earth so we can get all the big clicks like every other successful social media platform does. Yeah, has nothing to do with why we're killing it, is because we don't even watch the Super Bowl. I didn't watch it because I told you guys a long time ago that I wasn't going to watch football until they apologized for kneeling during the national anthem. I believe that they were let off the hook. I believed it was very disrespectful. Now, this is a business, and it's a business that's trying to attract many people from different walks of life, different genders or sexes, different ethnicities, right? Different ages, different sizes and shapes. Some people are ball-shaped, others are football-shaped, others are wiffle ball-shaped, which means they have no shape based on why it's in sight. But nevertheless, I didn't watch it because of that. I said to people, people's like, look, you're a Christian. Aren't you supposed to forgive? And I'm saying, yeah, I will forgive, but they haven't apologized. They don't think they did anything wrong. And so, as I have said, and I've said many times, but since the Super Bowl is fresh on our tongue and everybody watching right now watched it, except me, the host, you need to know that I said to you guys, look, if you are a citizen of the United States of America and have the privileges of the First Amendment and the Constitution at your beck and call, because you are one of us, and you get out of your uniform and get into your street clothes and you go to a nightclub or you go to a driving range or you go home or you go start a business or you go do whatever you want to do, and you want to talk about griefs you have with the United States of America, feel free, because you're an American. Part of the First Amendment, we always think of the First Amendment as free speech, and that's a very sort of a blanket perspective of the free speech that it covers, because they break it down. The first speech that is the single most important is your religious liberties. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or forbidding the free exercise thereof. They didn't want the government to ever interfere in religious services and the ability for the religious community to be part of the public and private interactions in America. So yes, you could be a governor of a state and say, I love Jesus. You can be a mayor of a town and say, I follow Allah. You can be the school board supervisor and say, I'm an atheist. That's freedom of religion. It applies to all philosophical ideas that you have access to subscribe to or not, based on your desire to how you see the world, your ideology. So, people sometimes think, you force the religious ideas, and of course, the First Amendment was to get religion out of the public sphere. Complete wrong. Lie. You're either uneducated or a liar, one of the two, because the founding fathers all reference God, all reference, let's have prayer before we start the sessions. Let's spend taxpayer money on Bibles going out to the Indian tribes. Thomas Jefferson, the deist, he did that. So they reference God and put monies into it. Do you know that I think 10 of the 12 states, original states, in their constitution reference Jesus Christ, and you can't even be a member of the Senate or Congress there if you don't accept Christ as Savior. It's in their constitution, the individuals, because this constitution also dealt with states' rights and as opposed to the federal government. So anything or anyone that has told you that the First Amendment in the first line was designed to keep the religious beliefs of people out of the public sphere is a complete lie. So you can either be a man or woman of integrity, go find out this information, be aware of it. So it doesn't mean you have to follow into it or believe in God, but you need to know what was true about the original intent of the Constitution. But if you continue to repeat this after you know better, then you're a liar, and that makes you evil because you are withholding my access to reality. So that's why lying is evil, and God even said so. You should not bear false witness or lie about people. Now, the other thing is it also says that you can redress your government and not be lawfared, and they don't come after you and charge you with some crime because you said, I don't like the government. You can peacefully protest. You can, the government's not allowed to come in and abridge the press. The press gets to be free to say and do whatever they want. All of those things, as you know, based on what you were just hearing, were all completely breached, certainly during the Biden administration, but for many administrations, trying to go in behind the newspaper and say, don't say this, don't say that. That's them basically shadow banning or shadow unconstitutionalizing one of the founding principles of the First Amendment. So it is important. And remember, people will always hide truth, or they will obscure it or censor it because it takes away what they want, which is power for themselves. Because power is pride, and pride is the original sin, and all sin comes from original sin. That's why God said, I hate pride more than anything. So that being said, if you are a football player and you're out and doing your life in your multi-million-dollar mansion and you want to do a press conference to say how terrible the United States is, be my guest. You're not a grateful person. That's pretty pathetic that you would do that. I've always said any country that allows you to burn its flag is exactly why you shouldn't. You should be so grateful you have that privilege that you wouldn't do it, because that privilege should be more important to you than the act. You wouldn't see that in China. Try to burn their flag, see what happens. Try to do it in North Korea, see what happens. Try to do that any theocracy, see what happens. So that's what makes it so beautiful and why you should respect it. And that was really what bothered me about these guys that did the protest and kneeled down and disrespected during the national anthem. It was during the game where everybody was trying to come together and find some continuity before we went about our unique lives outside of that, where we have different points of view and different ways of seeing things. And you could say, well, they're sports, so they have some prestige, and so maybe they're affecting people's thoughts, and so they have a duty, perhaps, to speak the truth and to stand for certain things, and that's fine. But do it in your personal citizen time, not when the flag, which represents all of us, including your ability to leave the stadium and crap on it. This is the time to say, not here, not now, not during that song. They never apologized. And they gave money to what has been proven now to be a scam, the Black Lives Matter movement, which was run by Marxists. I'm not making this up. You could read about who's founded it. They all ended up with 5, 6, 7 homes, multi-million-dollar. It was just a scam. But anyways, so yeah, it has, ideas have consequences. Living by those ideas have consequences. So I just said to them, if they want to say, look, we shouldn't have done that. We offended patriots. We offended returning soldiers or people who are in the military. We offended people that stood for this thing, and black and white, by the way, that want to salute our flag and be grateful for this freedom. And so if you guys want to say, we shouldn't have been involved in politics, let us just let the sport for everybody. We want everybody to come, everybody buy a ticket, everybody to have the freedom to enjoy this moment together and find what brings us together, which is the sport, then what brings us apart, which is the Marxist idea of let's make them into alienated groups so that they have to hate each other, and thus we can control them over power. So that's why I said, if you want to give $1 billion, and they have it, that's how ridiculous this football that is neither using feet or a ball shape is. It has that much money. Give $1 billion to a general welfare account for veterans so that they can get housing, medical attention, whatever they need if they were a veteran. Put money to there. Say we apologize. We shouldn't have done that. We see how it alienated. We'll never do it again. I'll jump right back in and watch all day long. That's all. I am a Christ follower and an American. We believe in redemption. We believe in repentance. We believe in forgiveness. We believe in second chances. But for those who realize they can pull all that nonsense off and then never say a word about it, and know that people like you would jump right back in, start watching like it never happened. Yeah, the guy down the street robbed all the street and told, but never mind, and let's go to a barbecue at his house. It just didn't work for me, so I don't watch it. Will not watch the NBA, never have watched it for that many years. Don't watch baseball anymore for the same reason. So that's me. And the reason that you will not see repentance. The reason you will not see them deciding that perhaps we need to be more respectful of this great nation and its free markets that gave us the ability to make this kind of money for just playing a game that can't even pronounce words in it that fit somehow in the scheme of the game itself, that you should be so grateful you just keep your mouth shut and just keep giving us entertainment and being the great athletes that you are. So that's just the way I look at it. That's the way I see it. And so I just didn't watch it. And I didn't know until I woke up this morning and we're catching up on my emails and whatnot, who even won. And I didn't care. I didn't care. Didn't faze me in the least. Could care less about the commercials. Could care less. Matter of fact, if there's anything that's more annoying to me than anything, it's why I stopped watching TV. Commercials. Can't stand them. Cannot stand the fact that I'm watching something for entertainment purposes and then suddenly, listen, we're going to interrupt this entertainment to try to sell you potato chips. Hey, buy some potato chips, by the way. Oh, by the way, buy this thing over. Oh, and by the way, take this thing. Oh, and by the way, here's a drug you might want. It's like, I just couldn't do it. So once we were able to tape, that's how it first started. You could tape an episode on TiVo, I think they call it. I love that because I could start playing it. As soon as it got to the commercials, I just ripped through it, fast forward, and got right back to the game. Did not want, now I get it, it's commercial. That's how they make their money. That's how they can afford to have these things that I get to watch. I get it. But I didn't want to watch the commercials. And so I'm not interested in your clever commercial or your amazing commercial or your insightful commercial. I just don't like commercials in general. But that being said, I think that I have a daily Brad out that I put out a while ago, a few days ago. And I'm setting that now because when the time is right, I do want to tell you about something that occurred to me that I've kind of been referencing for a while over the last year. And so it's just kind of an ode to that. And I want you to see, because I also want you to to watch Daily Brads, to get notifications for them and share them. So if you don't mind, I'm going to get off my football rant and I'm going to allow you to show them a Daily Brad. Good morning, Earth. It's God's comic, Brad Stein, and this is your Daily Brad. Tomorrow, I have a scenario that I am going to be part of that is something I've been praying about for a long time. It's a challenge, a problem that came up in my life. I feel like there was some misunderstanding and certainly a certain amount of false accusation that was given to me, but nevertheless, it's something I'm working through, and simply pray God's grace and mercy that it will end up with balance and peace and justice, and that God will be with me. And we've all had and are having times in our lives where a difficult situation is occurring. It could be a surgery. A friend of mine just had surgery, and thank God the surgery was good. But he has another one that has to do. That's it's going to be on your mind. It's coming up, and we pray that God will give him great favor in that as well. But my point is that our prayers, if you think about it, are about usually the future. I mean, they could be about, hey, I've had this issue with somebody for a long time and I'm trying to reconcile it, or, something I did that I can't get reconciliation for. Maybe there's something you did that was hurtful. Somebody may have passed away. You can't even make it right. So there's things like that are unique. But if you think about it, for the most part, prayers are about the future. Something you hope will happen, something you want to happen, something you pray will happen, a result that you want. And most of our prayers are about a need or a desire or a want or a challenge or a difficulty that we are going to come face to face with in the future. We don't know how it ends, but we know how we want it to end. And if you think about prayer And really what we should expect from a prayer. We do hear a lot of times where God expects us in prayer to have faith and believe in what we're speaking with a power, with a might. Speaking to this mountain to be lifted up and cast in the ocean, it'll be done. But there's always a caveat, always. God's always there saying, if it is in his will. Even in the prayer of prayers, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So ultimately, as a Christ follower, it's okay to have desires and wants. When you see all the healings that Jesus manufactured in his ministry, it was people saying, please, please, please heal me. Heal my body, heal my body, heal my body. And he did. But there was a reason why he healed their body. It was to prove and validate that God had come to earth. He did it to acknowledge that he had the right to be called God. It's true. I'm really here. This is how it's going to work. This is how I'm going to reveal myself to you. And so it wasn't for a show, or it wasn't to say this is the reason God exists, is to give you your desires. It was even the human desires, the flesh desires, which God cares about. We're here on the flesh earth, right? Even those are so that we get closer to God. And that's the difficult thing, because sometimes that means if we're really praying for God's will, then we may not get what we want. It may not look like we want. And that won't make sense to us. And that's where we have to decide, God, I want you more than my desires and my will. And we say that all the time until it's time for us to be face to face with our own challenge. And then we see where we're at. When I look at the persecuted church, they accept persecution. They don't want it. They pray to endure it and to overcome it and to be free from it. But they always say, hey, I'm honored to share in the suffering of my Lord. That's the reality of it. That's the truth of it all. And so, if you truly are a believer, you pray for God's will. You pray for the healing to overcome, to have victory. There were many healings, and people got exactly what they'd hoped for. But it was always to acknowledge God, draw us closer to him, and to say to him, thank you for your grace, your mercy. So keep that in mind. If you really, really, really want healing, the healing we really, really want is our soul's connection to Christ and becoming conformed to his image. All the rest of this stuff is just ways to get to that place. Easy to think about, easy to believe, hard to do when it's your turn. This is God's Comic, Brad Stein. This is your Daily Brad. Would love to send you my newsletters, tell you about my ministry. Go to bradstein.com and join the Militia of the Mind. Thanks.
So there you have it. I'm always walking around in the cold, in the warm. That happened to be a little warm spell. Why? Did you know we had a little warm spell last week? Because it's clearly gone.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about weather nowadays. It can never stick to something.
It cannot decide whether it wants to be warm or whether it wants to be cool.
Ha, ha, ha.
Well, listen, I'm glad you at least... Did you ever number the buttons or
No, I've
mark 'em?
memorized them.
Look at you. Well, son, we have a very special guest. Now, here, for those of you who don't know, my son does the editing to kind of clean it up a little bit, make it tight so you can listen to it. But this was a fairly long one. And you said you found it interesting?
Yeah, yeah.
Why?
It's
Why? What's so
oh,
interesting about a special effects coordinator, magician, skeptic?
well, because it's one of the few guests we've had that not only do you know, you've known him for a while.
Yeah.
It was less of an interview between a comic and a magician and more banter between two friends.
Yeah, well, he's a very, very, very iconic and famous magician in the community of magicians. Now, you aren't of the community of magicians, so he probably isn't somebody you would know. You weren't alive at that time, so you wouldn't know he was my friend. You are much more aware of maybe the music community, especially when it comes to the xylophone, which I know has always been your favorite instrument.
Yep, it sounds so much prettier than its name would suggest.
Yeah, and this name does suggest that there's something going on here that you may not want to have anything to do with.
I mean, its name starts with an X, and yet you never hear the X, so it's clearly trying to hide something.
They're already trying to fake you out into thinking you're going to like this, but right off the bat, something nefarious is taking place. So yeah, X, but we'll pronounce it Z, but don't let that throw you.
Honestly, it's always fun to see kids' books that are about the ABCs, and then they get the X, and it's a xylophone.
Oh, I know.
Trying to explain to a kid, yes, X, like in xylophone.
I know. Well, anyways,
Come on.
I'm grateful that you are a percussionist. Oh, and of course, you spell that with a T. A lot of people don't see that coming. But anyways, I'm glad that you enjoyed the conversation because you did the editing. It was quite a long couple hours. So it was something to be said. And I'll give credit to anybody out there. And it'll be St. Nick, and it'll be Ashley, and it'll be Carr and Boyd, and it'll probably be Stan, and it might be Bushquacker, and it might be Paula Fay Marie. There'll be a few that'll hang to the end because they're troopers, that, or they're just gluttons for punishment. But I'm grateful that you do, and I'm grateful of the things that you say to the people that come on that are new and suddenly jump in. You guys are so kind to them, and it is a nice little family we've created, and hopefully it'll be a family someday that you guys can mentor as we get hundreds and hundreds on at the same time. But for right now, it's just us and our little crew that gets passed on for the rest of the week. But I think you're going to enjoy this. So as I said, if you like the entertainment business, and if you liked films or even Broadway productions, things like that, and you've ever gone and seen a magic trick, you went to Frozen and the girl in the Broadway thing just vanished into sprinkles, or somebody floated, or you watched Forrest Gump and you saw Lieutenant Dan in his wheelchair, and you could clearly see he had no legs. Well, does have legs, so they actually created the illusion. They had some CGI, but there was a couple times when he was moving or whatever that they needed to basically just create an illusion of a wheelchair that he could be in that would hide his legs. He invented it. He created it with Ricky Jay, who was a guy somebody you should look up, very famous magician and actor who recently passed away, and I think we even talk about him a little bit. But you're also going to really go down memory lane with me about my life, what I did as a magician, and some of the things that I was involved with. So you are going to be intrigued by him. I'm a Christ follower. He's not. So we're going to have a little bit of that at the end. But I think you're going to find it a little bit more personal because it literally is me enjoying a reminiscing conversation with an old friend. But a friend that you, too, will find interesting in a realm and field of the entertainment world that more than likely you're not familiar with. So in that regard, I hope you enjoy it. So please, please, please sit back, relax, and enjoy a very intimate and interesting conversation with special effects expert and skeptic and old friend, Michael Weber. Michael Weber, or as I still get to call him, Mike. How are you, my brother?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. It is so good to see you. We have run into each other serendipitously over the years. I think we ended up at an airport You thought it was Orange County. I was thinking it was San Francisco. I just remember it was weird. It was like I was looking at you, go, wait a minute, is that? And you looked at me and said, Brad, it was just funny that because it had been so many years in between. But when you and I first met, I'm going to guess 82, 81.
Yeah, around there in
Yeah,
the early to mid '80s.
very much early in the 80s. And one of the things, folks, that you need to know about Mike Weber, is that he is a sleight of hand artist. I don't even know what you call yourself now. I know that there's always this new nomenclature of how people like to reference themselves, especially from this field. And of course, you also now are a consultant in film and live events for illusions and so forth. So, what title do you even give yourself nowadays?
It really depends on the job, but I've always, it's funny you talk about, trying to be famous. I think, you know, why not start being good and then just see where that gets you,
Right.
right? So I haven't really worked hard on titles so much, but just in terms of the verbs of things that I do, I have one of those old school business cards, that paper thing, those paper
Nice.
rectangles.
Yes.
Mine says, I ask questions, I answer questions, I tell stories and make things. And that's kind
Nice.
of it. That's what I do. I'm much more interested in the activities,
Mm.
in creating things and producing things than putting labels on them. But much of it has to do with magic and illusion, but there's lots of other things.
But it has served you well because isn't it interesting that this sort of branch of the performance art that deals with sleight of hand and illusion does translate into theater, into visual, I don't know what you
They
would
want it
call it.
for everything. I've consulted on film,
Yeah.
theater, television, live events. So it's a great way to augment storytelling.
Yes, and but what I found really interesting was, I want to take you back because I told you on the phone a few days ago that I had a story I was going to tell you, and it's kind of it's nothing earth-shattering, but it's something I've told people over the years, and so I wanted to tell you it as well. I thought, well, of all the people I should tell the story to someday, it should be you because it was about you, and you'll see that in just a moment. But for the folks watching, so those of you who know me, know my career, whether as a comic, some of you know me as actor, but very few of you would know me as a magician because that's how I started. My livelihood was close-up magician in Southern California in the 80s. So I did what they called table hopping mainly. That was in restaurants, going from one table to the other and performing magic. I was at a very well-known restaurant. I think it's still in Santa Monica called Gladstone's for Fish. And they had a version of that in Newport Beach. And then I was with a different restaurant called Poppy Star. And then RJ's The Rib Joint. So these were places that I used to perform as well as some Mexican restaurants. I was 5 or 6 days a week. I was performing close-up magic. And what I loved about you, Michael, was that you'd show up every now and again. And that's the best way to define it. It just suddenly you just were there. And it was just fun because it's like your vibe. You're a very interesting, idiosyncratic guy, which is my favorite people in the world. Artistic people, odd. You can't really put your finger on where they're coming from. You're kind of very nice guy and very gracious with your time. You're a kind man, but you're kind of private too, and you'll suddenly vanish into the shadows and off you go, and just that's how it's always been. Well, and it is, and it's like nobody can get too close to you. So, and that's I think your. I don't even know if you've thought of that like that, but it seems to be the case. People I know that know you, who
No, I
admire
mean,
you, they're all like, yeah, he kind of finds a monastery, a fortress of solitude somewhere, and we never get to see where he goes.
that may just be the side effects of not talking about yourself all the time.
Maybe.
Because I don't, if you think about it, have you ever reached out to me and I wasn't there?
Yeah, I guess not. But honestly, I tried to, be careful with your time. You're a busy guy, and
I think that's you're gracious, but the people I hear tell that story, it's kind of secondhand. It's fine. I'm fine being a man of mystery.
so this isn't something that is
They-
part of
my-
your. It's not part of your personality
I
trait, then.
I spend no time. I don't. I maybe it's privacy. Maybe it's just I don't. I would prefer for people to find out what I do by their own discovery or curiosity instead of me telling them about it, or other people saying, "Oh yeah, that's the guy who," or Weber made that, Weber did that. I'd much prefer so that the people see the work first
Yeah.
instead of seeing, your name on it
Well,
first.
I guess what I'm examining though is kind of the mindset of the magician. Somebody that would choose this branch of art must have a very specific way that they think, the way that they engage the world, and it is a secret of art in allegedly, right? I mean, you have these secrets that at one time you had to find a mentor, find a book, you had to figure this out, it was like martial arts. You had to be brought up belt by belt as the higher ups decided you deserved more information. So it's very, I mean, I got to tell you something. I'm old school. I like that about it. I liked it when you had to find the secret.
So we were in a place where you were trying to figure out why I'm such a mysterious fellow, and is
Yeah,
this
well,
cultivated?
and we can just pick it up from right there because, and I mean, look, I'm not trying to craft you into something you're
There's
not. I
no,
just,
no, no, and there's no mystery to be solved.
well, but and it's not even nefarious or anything. I'm curious. I think there's something to be said about the mindset of someone who wants to be a magician. It's not for everybody, and there's something about it that is unique. It's not like any other performance art because it's the one art that you hide your skill, which I think is the antithesis of what artists want to do, which is look how great I play the cello. Can
Yeah.
you believe this?
I,
And
I completely understand what you're saying. I really have always approached it, and my teachers approached it differently, and I approach it differently. I truly revere it as an art
yes.
because I think it's the most flexible of all the performance arts, to be sure. The problem is, as you well know, I've said many times and been quoted saying that magic is a strong enough art to support a weak performer. And I think the average person could walk into a magic shop or buying something online and that night be doing it for a friend. And if that person performed for a stranger without lots and lots of practice, some of the secrets of magic, some of the techniques, some of the things that are possible with subtlety or psychology or technology, if they just worked once and then got out of the way, you could absolutely give someone the greatest live magical experience of their entire life. What the real question is, can you, instead of doing something that's store bought, come up with something of your own? Not just a new idea, but a piece of magic that's symbolic of something that really represents an idea that you believe in and that you care about. And that's the stuff I'm interested in.
Yeah, it is the stuff you're into, and I'm going to give you a credit for that. We're going to talk about that for a second because again, this is it's an interesting conversation because for people watching this, well, but here's the thing. I mean, it's like Penn and Teller's show where they're given all these clues, but they can't really give the details because they're still trying to hide the art and the techniques. And I don't know, man. I think that's how it should be. I would never tell my family how a trick to work. I just took it seriously when they said nobody gets to know the secrets unless they're one of us. That's how
I,
I.
No, I completely respect that. But I also think that it's kind of like painting for painters. Unless the people really understand, if you walk into a museum and the person spends all the time really talking about brush strokes and about an underlayer and about doing lighter colors first and about scraping some paint away, that people are good for about 4 minutes of that. And I think that I've often equated a magic secret, the kind of the relationship of audiences or participants or viewers, consumers of magic, they think a magic secret is an apple, but a magic secret is an apple seed, right? It has the potential to be something magical, but you have to plant it and nourish it and wait for a while for it to grow into something and harvest it and present it in the right way. And usually what happens is people kind of get not really interested in magic, but curious about it. And you say, all right, you seem sincere. I'm going to share it with you. And you hand them an apple seed and they're thinking, this is not satisfying. This doesn't live up to what my expectation was. So I think that those divisions are both functional and practical and kind of sensible. That You can either have a very surface experience with it. You go into the magic shop at Disneyland, you buy a toy, right? And you kind of play with it. It's like buying a ukulele and thinking you're a musician, right? It's, yes, you can make some noise with it or play a song on it, but if you really, if you played a song for someone and they say, I want to know how you played that song, and you started talking about music theory and you started describing the chord progressions to them and the notes and how, you know, your particular fingering technique and fretting, that's not what they asked, right? It's going to be another musician or a guitarist or another violin
Yeah,
player that's
right.
going to be interested in that. And I think magic's no different than that. It's just people have a very romantic mindset about what it's going to be like. So they're either they think it's unsatisfying in some way, or if someone really takes the time to kind of show them what the deeper underlying principles are, maybe that's not as sexy as they were hoping it would be.
But what do you think it is about us? And I'm taking the liberties of putting myself in
Sure.
as a peer because we
No, people that love it. People
yeah.
that love it.
But I remember, I think first grade going in the library in my little town and checking out the Jerry Lewis Book of
Yeah.
Magic. It was
Yep.
Jerry Lewis
I
showing.
remember it.
But I remember looking at it and just going, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen in my life. And I would see magicians on television, perhaps, and this is back, well, we're kind of the same age, so 60s or whatever. Not a lot of
Sure.
programs. If the magician showed up, it was a fortunate occurrence. I'm
Sure.
watching. I loved it. And I remember vividly going into the magic shop in Disneyland, and
Sure.
it was the Adams rack of just kind of blow them out tricks, getting the three shell game and
They're
the
great tricks.
and the
They're great
multiplying billiard balls. And Mike, I remember they're in my bag, but I couldn't wait to get home because I couldn't believe I
These
was
were going to
going to know
multiply.
how the
Yeah.
three shell game worked. I couldn't
Well,
believe I
yes.
was privy to the magic. I couldn't believe it because everybody had grown up with TV and Maverick and whatever doing the three shell game. I'm going to know how it works. It's got to be amazing. I can't even fathom what the secret is. And then you find the secret and you go, what? That that's not the real
But
thing.
now, but now go one step further and you actually try it out for someone
Yeah.
and you know exactly what's going on. You are living on the other side of the curtain and you see the wonder in their
Yeah.
eyes, right? You see that you are giving them a rare experience.
Yeah.
It's like you cooked them a meal or sang them a song or knit
Yeah.
them a sweater, right? And all you did was move three little objects around and it wasn't where they thought it was and it ended up someplace else and they didn't see how you did it. So think about, for me, part of the joy in magic is the kind of the physics, the leverage of how much we can give a person in terms of an experience. The smallest amount of force, the smallest amount of input can produce such a magnificent output.
I remember even going back to those days where we were all, and I'm gonna do some reference, kind of re-remembering. I'm gonna take us back a little time to our youth, or at least the beginnings. Though you were probably certainly still more advanced than I was, certainly technically. You have that thing. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about too. I've noticed this in life, in the arts. There's lots of amazing pianists, but there's one Mozart. There's lots of amazing basketball
Sure.
players. There's one Michael Jordan. And when I would see magicians, I always knew I didn't have the A game. I couldn't do second deals and middle deals and a lot of the real high end stuff. I
But
couldn't
for
do.
me, that was never the measure. I know that stuff is technically difficult, and we both had, friends like Eric Morin, who just was, and is, couldn't be more technically talented with stuff. But one of the things he had, and one of the things that I always looked for and that mattered to me was, where did the person get their inspiration? Where did the person find the magic they were performing? And 99% of the time, they saw it in another performer's act. The reason, if you see a magician, probably the reason he's doing the trick you see him doing, is he saw another magician do it and felt a little bit of the magic, right? Remembered what that feels like, and now wanted to do that again. That is the complete opposite for me. I don't.
Oh,
If someone sees me work, I don't want to ever have them see that thing anywhere again, ever.
yeah. Well, but I remember. I'm going to throw out some names every now and again just to get your thoughts on them. Just again, a reminisce. But this will be a first name I'll throw out because I'm going to give you a story behind it. John Carney. What do you think about?
Sure,
Tell me about John.
he's fantastic. He's unbelievably talented in terms of sleight of hand. I also think that he fell in love with magic. He had great teachers, Fawcett Ross. When he moved out to California, I met him because I think he moved out to California to work Magic Island, and I was working Magic Island when that opened up too in Newport Beach on Lido Island. And that was kind of around the time when we knew each other, maybe a little bit before that.
Well, yeah, I
But I
worked at the
remember,
island too at the
yeah,
same time.
right. Yep. But I think we knew each other just a little bit before that. But then that kind of happened, and that brought a lot of people in. But then he became a Vernon student after that. And, John's a magician's magician. I will say that he's a really creative guy, but if you go see him perform, what's original with John are his characters. What's original with John are his presentations and approaches. But the magic he performs is classic magic, the egg bag and cards across and cards to pocket, right? These are kind of fundamental, not fundamental in terms of low, but fundamental in terms of the base, right? They're not fundamental, they're foundational. That's a
Yeah,
better
they're
word.
gold standards
So
of
yeah,
what.
they really are gold standards. And an amateur beginning magician can approach it and try a version of it, but Carney does all that stuff at the top level. But I think when I see him really shine, it's when it's the combination of, look, if he's hanging out with a bunch of other magicians, the magic he does for the other magicians is going to crush him. But I don't think the average audience member can appreciate the level of what he's doing.
Yeah.
But when he's performing for audiences, the combination of the classic magic that he's performing incredibly well with the characters he performs, like Mr. Misto, then that's where I think you're really getting a glimpse at kind of peak Carney, is that combination of character. So it's not that I think the opportunity was there for him, if he had the same passion for it that he had for magic, to be an unbelievable character actor.
Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, but the reason I bring him up, and it's a perfect segue in because it kind of reverts back to what you said that prompted this, was I was talking to him, I mean, through email. I bought a book from him or something because I left magic when I became a comic, and then I was doing comedy magic, and then that sort of morphed into basically stand up with a little magic at the end as my grand finale. And then eventually I just said to myself, and I'm going to be honest, I felt there came a point where I felt a bit of a disdain for magic, like
Sure.
it was lower than this stand up comedy, because the stand up comedy there's nowhere to hide. There are no props to. Now I was using comedy magic, so in that regard I did have props. But once you're doing straight monology, there is nowhere to go. If you're eating it, oh well, they hired you for 45 minutes, you're 5 minutes in, keep going, and it's a
Time to start
different
mugging.
it's
Funny faces are good.
yeah, right. It's a and don't think I haven't done plenty of
Oh, I
those.
know. That's when the shtick's got to kick in, right?
But well, part of what made me what I was yeah, was always very high energy, but I didn't fake that or try to create that. It was very much the way I think it was
No,
very innate.
that's a core for
Yeah,
comedians and for
yeah,
magicians and for artists is authenticity.
yeah,
Always when
yeah.
I'm talking, if guys come to me and they're talking about it, always one of the things that I'm emphasizing is the sense of authenticity. And how can you be authentic when you're doing a trick you learned from a guy that saw another guy
Well,
do
but
it,
okay, so
that a third guy made up?
let me come full circle. Let me finish my thought because I'm actually derailing myself on half of the stuff I'm saying to you. Is that I said to I said to Carney something about I was asking about a trick. I think he did this. I remember these tricks from Magic Island.
Sure.
Just like I'm going to tell you about a trick I remember that you did at Magic Island. But I remember this trick where he opened up a paper bag, just unfolds it, reaches in. There's a goldfish bowl with water, and I'm like going, "What?" And I remember
I don't know if it was in his book that I got or some other older book that I chanced upon the technique that I think he had to have used that I didn't know before. A masking, I'm gonna use some pen and teller, a masking technique dealing with your clothes and so forth. But
Yep.
I didn't know that existed. So when I saw it, it's like, wow, that's really clever. But I made some reference to it in telling him how cool that was, how wonderful. I remember that experience. It took me all these years to finally see what happened. That was fun to just be in mystery for so long. And he said to me, uh, just keep in mind, it's a long time ago. It's on an email. I don't remember anymore, but something to the effect of just keep, just you don't want to do my routine though. You want to do your version. You want to create your thing. And here's what I'm getting at after that long prelude is I remember in my head thinking, why would I want to do your stuff?
Oh, I know, but that's because it's you. But understand the reason he said that wasn't out of fear. The reason he said that was out of past experience.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't trying to steal anything. I
No, no,
I
no, no.
was
It wasn't. It isn't about theft. It's that sadly, a lot of the people that get excited by it, they're part of the culture, part of the practice is you can go into a store and buy a thing, or people do write books and you can learn these tricks, right? And you get to use them. But when people come up with original material, and sometimes it can be the smallest change or addition to something. Like the thing you saw was a water bowl production that he turned into a goldfish production. Because if you remember it, it was kind of a very flat,
yeah,
squat bowl. It
yeah.
almost looked like
Which is
a
the only way
section
he
of a
could have
sphere.
done the, and it's the only way the
Right.
technique would have worked. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And it's associated with a particular creator. Um, it's not important to kind of discuss that now methodologically, but he really did take it and do something with it that made it fit him, came from him.
Yes.
So the challenge is what happens when another guy comes along and says, I really like that. I liked how I felt. I understand the technique. I'd like to do that. And it's in the book, and all he added was a fish, right? But sometimes, with a joke, right? Everybody tells an airline food joke. Everybody tells the girlfriend joke or whatever it is, but it's that little twist, it's that little something
Yeah.
that makes it special. And a lot of people that get into magic are not performers first. They're not um, they're not artists first. They're kind of hobbyists that the opportunity to perform for them expands out of that.
Yeah.
So if you've never created something, you just can't understand how difficult it is. Not
Yeah.
in terms of painful, but in terms of how much input is required to get that one little tiny simple gem. And it might be timing, or it might be using one word instead of another word.
Hmm. Well, but I guess what was
What felt weird to you?
what was odd to me was that anybody would even think for a second
Oh, I
that
know. Well,
they would get
but
any
that's you.
joy,
I
Michael,
know.
that they would get any satisfaction
But you've
performing
seen,
something that you didn't create. I don't see what's the point? If you're not going to create your own thing, it wouldn't even be fun for me. I would, when I started out in comedy, Michael, they had all these stock jokes. You drop, they drop a glass, put that anywhere, and all these stock jokes. Well, there's a reason why they have stock jokes because they work. They're good jokes,
sure.
but
Yeah.
everybody uses them. And
Yep.
so I did it a couple times, and somebody laughed. This is what happened to me. I did a stock joke, and they laughed, and I remember feeling hollow. And I go, "What's going on?" It's like because that wasn't my laugh. I
Right.
didn't write that. I gave
Nope.
some guy, probably from vaudeville, wrote this thing, came through here. I said, "I got to laugh." It's inauthentic because it's not mine, somebody
No.
else's. So
You
even though
performed a
they don't
comedy.
know, they
You
think I'm
performed a comedy
funny.
seance. That
Yeah,
was a
but
comedy seance.
yeah.
You were a medium, and on stage you evoked the spirit of an earlier comedian who had passed on.
Yes, but but it was but it had no satisfaction because the laugh they're going to give me credit. That was funny, but it's like but it's inauthentic. I don't deserve that. I want to come in other words, I decided there's going to be things happening in this club every week because it was, 5, 6, 7 shows a week every week when I was performing clubs. Somebody's going to drop a glass. Somebody's going to smoke a cigarette. That's when you could smoke. A waitress is going to walk in front of you. They're going to stop
Sure.
and drop checks while you're performing. Somebody's going to go to the bathroom. There's a handful of things that are going to happen at least once. You should write your own jokes for every one of
Yes.
those. And I did. I
And
had my own.
and as a magician, you should use the book of mine. It's out of print now, Lifesavers. That whole book is about don't walk around with a pocket full of garbage. What think about where you might be, what that setting might be. There you go. What objects are in there? You could sell that and buy a second house. 400 bucks on eBay. But that's what that was about, 1991, and that was about instead of walking around with a bunch of plastic stuff, you know, the multiplying billiard balls in your pocket. Think about where you might want to perform a piece of magic. Think about what's going to be there, so that what you're actually doing is informing yourself to have the ability or the theatrical power to be able to perform something in context with what's there.
Yeah.
It's
Which
exactly
was
what you did with the comedy. It's exactly the same thing.
well, but that was the joy of it. It's mine. I'm creating my world to give to you. I guess maybe I know you know what I'm talking about, but I guess
Yeah,
I'm just
but I
flustered.
have to tell you, no. I have to tell you that it gets a lot of lip service, but when it finally comes down to it, it takes so impossibly long to come up with something that even approaches a classic that you can have access to, that I think most people would rather have the reaction from the classic than the struggle to get there, right? That easy line, the stock line, is so much easier. And
Yeah.
think of how many lines you had to go through to get to one that worked as well as a stock line. It was gold when you got it. And just like a great magic idea, think of how easy it would be for some kid in the back of the room to go, oh, that's a great idea, for when someone, lights up a cigarette, right? That's what could be easier to take.
But when you start in comedy, it's very the part of the challenge is that you don't know if you're any good at it. You think you are, but you don't know because it's the only performance art I'm aware of that you have to rehearse in front of the audience. You have to. I can put a
Mentalism's the same way. You can't practice mentalism because it's interactive, right?
okay.
And really great mentalists that do something called a Q&A act, which was really big at the turn of the century, the one before the one we just turned two turns ago. The question and answer act was you have someone on stage, people write down questions, and then without reading those questions, the person on stage picks up those thoughts and then answers those questions or talks about the material. The structure of that is 100% dependent upon the direct and real-time interaction. A comedian, although you won't know whether your jokes are good or not, could walk in for a sound check, right? And could do the first 15 minutes. They could tell their first joke.
Yeah.
A person kind of doing classic, I won't say modern mental magic, but kind of classic theatrical mind reading, there's nothing you can do without other people to interact with and play off of.
Okay,
So
and
it's
I get you on that, but here's
a really great mentalist of a couple of years ago who passed away, Bob Cassidy. He often equated the Q&A act, the question and answer act. He said the best Q&A performers are stand-up comedians because they see a thing or they get a piece of information and they're able to turn it into something entertaining that's in context. If
Yeah.
you're just standing on stage and you start doing a joke about someone that dropped a glass, that's funny if someone dropped a glass, but no one did, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Right.
The joke's a good joke. It's just now not in context anymore.
Well, but the only thing I think caveat I would make to defend my position about about how difficult it is to be a comic
Yes.
is
Is
this.
how much bigger my houses are than yours.
That's right. But here's what is true though. You're right. For that particular branch of mentalism, you do have to get this rhythm of learning how to work the crowd, and you have to get used to being extemporaneous because you don't know what the guy's going to do, and
Only if you're going to be good.
Yeah.
But if it's so much easier to be a comedian, how come there are so many really good comedians and so few good mentalists and magicians?
Yeah, right. But you could
I'm waiting.
practice you could practice the technique you may not get the response you would hope, or you're not used to the rhythm of how to engage the person. I agree with you on that, but at least you would know the technique and how to put it out
I
into
don't,
practice.
that's like
I
saying I
got to
know how
get a
to,
response. I
that's like
have
saying,
to get a
no,
response
it's like
to
saying
know
I
I'm.
know how to speak English. I got to tell you, I went to I was at improv at the Spectrum in Irvine
Mhm.
4 nights ago, 5 nights ago. And I saw two bad comics and a great comic. And the bad comics were not evil people. There was nothing about them that connected with the audience.
Hmm.
They couldn't connect. And sadly, their instinct was to get edgy and to kind of get critical of the audience. Um, and look, the audience felt kind of cohesive for some reason. Maybe it was that they all paid the same ticket price,
Yeah.
but it just it didn't work. And I was uncomfortable for the guy
Yeah.
because I saw what he was doing, and the material wasn't fantastic. He had a couple of good jokes, but the rest of the stuff wasn't really great. And you kind of wonder how they get on stage at a place like this when there's so many really good
Was it a
people. And we also
younger?
know
Was it a
it was
younger
not.
comic?
It wasn't.
Oh,
This is a guy who's probably in his late 40s and should
okay.
know. I think he's a guy who's on the road, but I also think that one of the things that happens is if you're authentic, your material is both as a magician or as a comedian, as any artist, what you are sharing has to change over time because your experience changes, which means who you are isn't different, but hopefully it's grown in some
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've had some new experiences.
Right.
And one of the problems with Q&A is, or of theatrical mind reading is, you can't do it when you're 15.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. Nobody buys you.
No, you're going to be the Doogie Howser of mentalists,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's funny that you say that because I do see the change that had happened in comedy on a lot of levels. One, the Gen Z, I don't even know where Gen is anymore, but these younger guys, they're not that funny. What they have learned to do is leverage TikTok and leverage
yes,
these
I've
things, and
watched
they
them.
build an
I've watched
audience.
them. Yep.
And the audience doesn't care, Mike, that they're not that funny because it's an influencer. I can't believe I'm in their presence. And it's a disservice to stand-up comedy. You should learn how to have the chops
I
to.
feel the same way about people that take a magic trick on TikTok and show it and then
Oh, I
immediately
hate
turn around and
that.
show that. I know, but they're the trouble with all of this stuff is that it's reducing everything to content. And the only goal is to hold your eyes in your mind long enough to show you another thing and another thing and another thing to kind of produce these successive dopamine hits, right?
Mm.
That's all it's for. And
Yeah.
it's existed since we were in the caves, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that there were parents that said, ah, all you kids do is go into the cave and sit in front of that fire and look at that painting of the hunt on the wall. Why
Right.
don't you come out and learn how to pick berries or chase down a saber-toothed tiger? And it's like, no, mom, it's really cool because with the light, it looks like they're moving, and we kind of understand how the animals move, and we learned 4 or 5 different ways to hold a pointed stick. And so we've had content for a really long time. I just think that now that we're incorporating algorithms and things that learn us and learn how to adapt the material, to adapt the content to the viewer, that it just produces this kind of very almost addictive cycle where I don't think it's super great for our brains.
Well, it's certainly not. It numbs it to authenticity, and there is this sense of a disconnect from true relationship. It's so it's probably in time we're going to see the destructiveness of this way of engaging in humanity. It's not going to work. There's no tenderness to it. There's no warmth to it. I mean, for some of the people watching us right now, I hope they're enjoying this. I know if a magician stumbles on it, he will. But I just think it does have other attributes that people can learn from. And part of that is just the way that artists have a purpose in culture, in communicating and helping people feel things and rediscover things and open up creativity. That's so
And
important.
curiosity, right? It feeds
Yeah.
it, it promotes curiosity.
And we live in a culture where, they everything is safe enough to be behind an iPhone, but you're waiting for that follow, that like, that this, that, but it's all false, that you don't really know this person. And there was nothing at stake. There's nothing at stake to meet a real person and try to say, hi, what's your name? How are you doing?
I
And
don't know. I agree with you on a human level, but tell that to the guy that got 1 million hits on one video clip, right? One TikTok, and now is fighting to get past 300 on everything that comes past that, right? I know a couple folks that have surfed the algorithm and made a little bit of money with it. And someone used a magic trick of mine and got like 16 million hits in a day. So I've seen what that's like and how a thing can go viral. But it is a lot easier to be a solid performer. One of the funny things about magic and about comedy is we get to use our material for some extended period of time, right? You'll take it on the road for a year and then you'll do a Netflix special, right? Or you'll do an
it
album.
takes that long to come up with an hour anyways. It's
Sure.
actually
Yeah,
very difficult.
I get it. Very difficult. But you get to work that, right? Now you've got to replace it when it's time to go around again. You know, when you think about the content creators, they've got to come up with a new 2.5 minutes every day.
But
Every day.
it's like they've become advertisers. Like they become.
Of course, it's all advertising.
But
Television is advertising.
I mean,
It is
these are the people
advertising.
we used to make fun of that sat in the boardroom saying, "So we got this new Chevy. What do you say that we have this these balloons shoot out of the trunk?" And we mock these guys, and that's become people's livelihood. You know, as a side hustle. I don't know. It's just a crazy world that is perfect for magic. It's perfect for a place.
It's not perfect. It magic is again a strong enough art that someone can take it and compromise it and use it for their benefit. It's very easy to take it and reduce it to content.
Of
But I
course,
don't think it's
anything.
good. I don't think
Anything
it's
is that
good.
way. I'm good. I want to, before we move in this next section, and I'll talk to you all day long, but I don't want to lose the momentum of some of the things I did want to show you so we can get into some other topics that I do want to talk to you about. But
And you said there was a nice story. I like the idea of a nice story.
yeah, it's a nice
Did we
story,
have it?
and it's coming. It's coming.
Oh, okay, good.
But
All
I
right,
want to
all
show
right.
you a couple other things for it. I told you we're going down memory lane, and I just
All
want
right,
to,
I'm ready.
I
I'm
want to
ready.
share it with you. So,
You're going to show me my afro,
1980.
right?
I'm 20 years old. I cannot go into the Magic Castle except for Sunday brunch. And I am with Wayne Hershey, who was a bartender magician at Poppy Star in Newport Beach. You probably knew
Yep.
Wayne.
Yeah, no, we both do it.
Great guy, nice guy, you know,
Character.
rugged, blue collar magic kind of guy.
I
He
always
was,
thought of him. I hope this doesn't sound ungenerous because I really liked him and I don't have an unkind word to say about him. But just in terms of kind of funny character, he always struck me as the Barney Fife of magic.
yeah, no, he was,
There really was just kind of that shakiest gun in the
yeah,
West. And look, he did some good magic.
no, he
It wasn't
did.
that he wasn't a good
And
magician, but there was
he,
something very tenuous about him, very tentative about him.
No, and he was my first kind of magician friend because Poppy Star was my first professional gig as a magician, where everybody was a performer. So you were a waiter and then you played
Oh, right.
guitar
There
and
was a singer, right?
yeah, that was what it was. So I started out as the host, then I ended up being busboy magic. So he was the bartender. So here I'd lived in Indiana. I learned my magic on my own through books and trying to figure out. I would sit down at the table. And when I was 18 years old, my friend's dad owned a restaurant. I said, could I come in here and perform once doing magic table hopping? All I knew was Bert Allerton had a book that said how to go have cards at the table and say, for $5, I'll come work. Now, this is a pump room in Chicago in the 40s. It's
Right?
five
Yep.
bucks a pop, which is like 50 now. And I just said, I'll do it for $3. I just wanted to do magic.
I
I
get
just
it.
wanted to
I get it.
perform, but I would sit because I lapped. I use this tech. I'm not, nobody knows what I'm talking about unless they know, but I used that technique where I had to sit because I didn't know that you could stand and find other ways, which eventually became the only way I did it.
Right.
It just was more convenient, even though there's
No, it was the way you learned it. It was the path that led you to where you were.
but Wayne took me to the castle because he had a mentor, a guy named Floyd Baldwin. I don't know if you ever know that name, but he
I
was
remember that name well. Yeah.
okay. Well, Floyd was a Vernon guy and as well, and so just nice people, maybe hobbyists that were just passed it on. They're those kind of
Sure.
great guys that
No,
were
it's not.
magic.
Believe me, the status of amateur and professional is not the designation, because some of the most important creators and some of the best technicians and some of the best performers have been amateur magicians, people that did not pursue it professionally. And a lot of times the folks that pursued it professionally were the folks that kind of bought six tricks off the shelf and then
Right.
just got comfortable doing it.
Well, and there must be something to that because when I was doing it professionally, I got to be honest with you, I was kind of got burnt out. I wasn't doing a lot of creativity. I kind of got my set down and I just stuck
Yeah,
it. And it was only when I quit magic and kind of really rinsed my hands of it for quite a while that I started having this little itch and I came back to it as a hobby. And I have had more enjoyment coming back and doing it just for my fun. I still
sure.
every day pick up cards and screw around with just because I enjoy it. I enjoy
I get it.
that technique. But I'm at the castle in 1980, and I'm with Wayne, and who walks by but Ricky Jay. And
Sure,
he goes, Ricky, come over here. And he said, you know, this is my friend. He's never been to Magic Castle. And of course, I knew Ricky Jay from television, the long
sure.
hair, the throwing the
Yeah,
cards. And he said, would you sign a card? And he did. So there's the Ace of Hearts.
there you go.
The
That's
signed
his,
from
that's absolutely his handwriting.
1980.
Yep.
Luck to Brad, luck to you, Ricky Jay.
Yeah.
So that was something that's been in my archives for so many years. Treasured it, and we'll talk about that in a minute because people will find out that you were in business with that guy, and he was such an interesting character. This came in the mail when I had a little agency back in the day with a guy named Ken Sands.
I remember that.
Let's say uh, life is never anything but heaven for the hedonists on Paradise Island. We
Oh
all
yeah.
wish you were here with the hedonists. Daryl, Michael Lamar, Paul Harris, Richard Kaufman, Alan Fleisby,
Uh, uh, um, uh, Fleischman
Fleischman. Okay.
or
Anyway,
Fleischer.
so
Yeah.
I got that,
That's
and
nice.
around that same time came this little card from Japan.
Oh yeah.
And it actually says, Brad, wow, this place is great. Lots of good stories already. Thank you very much for thinking of me concerning the restaurant jobs. Your friend, Michael Weber. And
Yeah.
that's something you sent to me. So I
I
must have
remember. No, you hooked me up for something. I remember that. Was
I
it?
don't
I think it
well
might have been RJ's or Gladstone's. I think I filled in for you before or something like that.
well, I hope you served me well, my friend. I hope you representing me. Um, I actually remember Daryl Martinez calling me and saying, "Hey, if you could get me a gig at a restaurant, I'll trade you. I'll teach you some sleight of hand." So I remember thinking, "Man, these guys that were so well respected in the magic community, uh, they can't get a gig. It's like, what is going on?" Tell me about Daryl Martinez.
He was amazing. He was virtuoso.
Mm,
The he understood sleight of hand very well. It's funny that there were kind of two or three Daryls over time. When he
mm,
first came into magic, he was very soft spoken and really super strong, technically difficult magic. Really a giant kind of a splash on the scene when he showed up. Everybody was excited about what he was doing and how he was doing it. Very respected by the professor and the kind of the old masters of the time. But appealing to all the younger generation as well. Over time, when he worked at places like Magic Island or then Caesar's Magical Empire in Vegas and a couple of other places, he developed kind of a funnier, sillier persona when he performed. It wasn't if you hung out with him, you would see a little bit of that character. So it wasn't something completely made up, but that kind of silliness or that over the top, even though the magic was still very, very strong, the kind of more theatrical performance persona kind of took over later on, and it's not like he diminished in popularity or effectiveness or anything, but it wasn't. It was it was really more pure and more special early on.
mm. I also remember at the island seeing Michael Lamar up close, doing close up. That's the first time I saw the floating dollar bill.
Yeah,
And if you had never known of that technique as a magician was basically
yeah, real
self-taught,
magic.
you're going, I don't, this is what the heck? I
Yeah,
don't, you know,
I miss that week in science.
yeah, but you know how fun, and and from that point on, I would always want to know how the magic worked. I'm an autodidact, so it's how I learn anyways. But I always loved information, and it just because I want to keep it in my arsenal so I can create, like to know a technique and have access to it if I
Sure,
need it. It's so
I
important.
understand
So
that.
that's why it was always important to me. But but I did find that a few years ago I stumbled on the Shin
Yeah,
Lim, and he did that routine with a card and smoke coming out of it. Anyways, the first time saw it, I remember thinking, okay, you are completely fooling me, and I like it. I would rather just kind of do what I never have been able to do for so long. Enjoy being fooled by magic, and I was surprised that I enjoyed that experience instead of just longing to know the technique. So something had
I,
changed in me.
yeah, it's something changed in you. I think that you found some, to be the analyst you're not paying for. I think you found some satisfaction in developing your stand-up material and the response you got from that. So part of that hunger to kind of have that toolbox be so full, it that eased up because now magic was just something that you could enjoy.
Yeah. And I really appreciated that. And I was gonna here's I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the story so we can move to the next phase. Now I've built it up so much it's gonna be quite a flop.
A letdown. That's all right. I'm ready.
But but it has to do with you. Just a
All right.
little thing about you. So number one, I always respected your work so much. And I do want to say this. One of the things that I really appreciated about you, Michael, because the truth is, you've got to know, your status in that field. I mean, why wouldn't you? You know the accolades you've received. You know how people of the highest order in magic treat you, think of you. So it is what it is. That's nothing to be ashamed of that you happen to excel at something that,
Oh, I'm not.
or
I'm not. I don't. I
so.
don't feel shame. But also, I just think it's. I'm just surprised that everybody doesn't find the same level of satisfaction of engaging in the process that I do.
But
That's the
it's what
surprise
it's
for me.
what I was saying to you earlier, though. There's only certain people that get to that. There's a progression from junior high, high school baseball, college baseball, single A, double A, triple A. These are progressions that go like this. But when you get to triple A, and then you want to make one more step to the majors, it isn't like this.
Right.
It's like this. It's
Yeah.
something else that just some people will be anointed to be able to do. Because, dude, I could practice all day long. I would never be able to do some of the technique you do. I don't have that. I can do the technique. I'm not bad. I'm not a novice. I can do some pretty decent sleight of hand. But that highest, the Steve Forty stuff, forget
Yeah.
it.
That's another
Forget
level.
it. It's impossible. That is a different thing. And I think it's genetic. I don't think you can learn that. Can you? You
I
can't be a
I
virtuoso because you want to be.
I don't know. Maybe all of us have. Maybe all of us are kind of tuned to some frequencies more than others, and the people that feel like virtuosos to us are the people where there's a stronger intersection or better alignment between what they're kind of built for and what they're not, which is why some people really kind of stand out, right? Like we see the person that we don't, isn't a looks like an average person on the street, but they've got an unbelievable voice,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of it's finding what that is. And I think people, I know I'm very fortunate to love the thing that I have had so much
But your
success with.
creativity though is kind of um I just don't think you can manufacture it. You can probably learn to be more creative as a person,
Yeah, yeah,
but you
right.
either have a different a different level of perspective than others. It just is true. And I'm guarantee you've met people like that that you say the same thing.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. But I think one of the characteristics of that, or the defining factors of that, is people who, like, I've had young guys call me up and say, you know, I've got a job selling insurance, but I'm also doing a restaurant 3 nights a week, and I'm thinking of just kind of throwing the regular 9 to 5 job out and going for it. What do you think? And the answer is don't. Keep the day gig, because if you really want it, you don't have to ask anybody that question. If you really are hungry for it, there just isn't a question.
That's
That's
right.
what you have to do.
That's right.
You have to do it.
No, that's absolutely true. I think if they ask, it's probably not for you
And
because
and
when
that I think that's one of the things that I see is people who kind of get some success of getting a foot wet, right, or get one leg all the way in, and they're kind of unsure. They're there forever. They'll never get to the other side of it. They may achieve some other level of success, or maybe a lot more level of personal satisfaction, but it just it just has to be something in you where it's not a choice. It's not a
right.
choice.
No, I remember my dad telling me when I was doing close-up magic, he said, "Hey, that's great." He always supported me because he wanted to be an actor. He moved from Indiana to California, and he was a singer and so forth. And it never panned out for him. So he was supportive that I was kind of in that business.
Yeah.
But he said at one point, you might want to go to school and just learn something, just to have something to fall back on. And I remember
Yep.
thinking, same thing. I remember thinking in my head, I don't think you understand. There's no there's no falling back. I'm
Right.
going to be a professional magician. I don't know what to say other than I don't know how, but I'm doing this thing. There is no other option. There is no plan B. I
There's not even a
promise you.
question in your mind, right? There's no hesitation.
And
There's
everything
no
I've ever wanted to
uncertainty.
do, I mean, I've never been famous in anything, but everything I've ever wanted to be, I wanted to be a professional magician. I was. I wanted to be a professional comedian. I have been for over 30 years. I wanted to be a professional actor. I've been in 25 films. I wanted to be an author. I've written 2 books. I've been on television shows. I was in magazines. One of my favorite things happened. I don't know where. Oh, it's hanging up right over here. That's a New Yorker.
Oh,
That
great.
was my biggest coup. Was I had an 8-page profile written about me in the New Yorker magazine in
Awesome.
2004, which is where Ricky Jay also had
Yeah.
his famous profile. So to me, I felt like I'm in the same
Yeah.
magazine that guy was in, which I always admired him so much. And you would come into to this place I would work. I don't know why. Maybe just to see what I was up to, or to see if you could glean something fresh that would make you think. Because I was a really good entertainer. That was my
It might
strength.
it might have been for a meal.
Might have been, might have been just hungry, and that was all. That was the closest. And I was, yeah, you were stuck having to avoid me.
RJ's had great ribs.
But,
Gladstone's had good fish.
but they did. But one thing I appreciate about you, buddy, was you would, if you would did something, and I said, "How did you do?" You'd always show me. Now, so people watching this right now, they're going, "Well, okay, whatever. You're a magician. He's a magician." But there is this, there is this thing that a magician has to decide for whatever reason that you are worthy of the information. There was a science fiction writer, I forget his name. He's very famous, but he put out his first book in the 60s, and he got a letter from a famous author, a woman. I forgot her name. She's very funny. I'm forgetting everybody's name now. But anyways, she said, "Hey, I saw your book. It was wonderful." And this is what I remember in this story. He said, "You're not a writer till a writer tells you you're a writer."
Yeah,
And I
I
remember
get that.
thinking, yes, I've had a lot of people laugh at me, but when a comedian told me I was funny,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm funny. So when a magician of your status would tip something, and it was, I don't know that I asked you
No,
that
but
much.
I think that one of the great things about magic is it's a meritocracy. I've traveled around the world on magic, and when I was a kid with no money and no nothing, you would be in a town for a day. You'd find out where the magicians are hanging out. You go there, and that night you could have a place to stay. Some judge that was an amateur magician would take you out to dinner. A guy that was an attorney would or a historian would give you a tour of the town. They would just open it up. And I think I've always kind of imagined or thought about it the way that, you're a kid with a trumpet, right? You got your axe, you've practiced at home, you played the album slower so you could kind of follow along. Then you got up to speed. Then you kind of found your own way with it. And you could walk into a club. And when guys are just kind of hanging out and cutting it up, that if you were given a chance and you had chops, they know you did the work.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it's really about. So I don't think that every magician is super shut off. And I don't think that every magician is super open. I think that the magic in a larger view as a community, the people that are the most respected are the people that earn it and treat magic with respect. And in that way, it doesn't, there's all this talk of why there are more women magicians. It's just because it's only in the last 10 years that this generation of women have gotten interested in magic. And there's a little bit of a struggle right now because many of them, even kind of the top names, are still pretty good, but there's not yet. There will be, but it's going to take time, right? There's no one that's put in their 10,000 hours of flight time in female magicians. There will be, it hasn't been long enough for that to happen. So that it's not that there's gender walls or an old boy network or anything like that. It's just, you have to have whatever this new blood is going to be, whatever this new group is going to be, they have to have had their flight time. And out of the 10 or 12 women that are kind of really working hard at it right now, we're going to see one of those rise to the top, maybe two, right?
And I don't know why they couldn't, but I will say this, and maybe simply because it's what I'm used to, but it is difficult for me to picture a woman dealing seconds and stuff. Something about maybe the femininity. It feels more like a raw. It's smoky corners. It's out in the back. It feels not like a feminine thing. I don't know if that sounds sexist. I don't mean it like that. I just feel like it. Well, no, but Jordan
No, but
Peterson.
hang on. Have you ever played blackjack in Vegas?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they can deal.
What's the ratio to male to female dealers in Vegas? It's
Well,
probably 2-1 now.
okay. Yeah, from a shoe. But they're not thinking,
I'm just talking context. If you go to the Four Queens, they still deal single deck from 1-8.
So you would show me things. I remember you shooting a rubber band, hits the ground, spins back and comes back. I'd never
Yes.
seen that. That was the other thing that I always loved about you, man. You came up with crap. It's like, where do you come up? How did you find that? And you showed me how to do it. And I tried to learn. I never nailed it. Once in a while it would work. I couldn't get it consistent. But here's the thing. I held on to that for 25 years. I never showed anybody, it just, you gave me this thing. It's nobody else's
Yeah,
until I was given
I get
permission
it.
to
Yep.
give it to
I
somebody
think
else. And then I
I
came
respect
across
that.
this rubber band book, this newer rubber band book that finally put it out in print. And it made me feel like, you know what? I held on to that stinking thing, waiting for the person to deserve it. And now they're putting it out. Anyways, I'm really all over the map because I just, well, because I had such, it was
No, but
such a,
you're talking about a thing you love, and
yeah.
over time, our relationship to that thing changes, and other people's relationship with it changes, and sometimes a stranger can do a thing that they don't see the harm in it, and it can affect you in some way. And I think one of the things that happened there is the technique I taught you was technique I came up with, and I came up with that to replicate kind of a grail effect. One of my teachers talked about
Who was
that.
the teacher?
So the two people that talked about that were Charlie Miller and Di Vernon.
Oh,
And it's a way too long a story, but the shorter version of it is two magicians went to Mexico. One of them had just done a trade show for Polaroid that just came out with a Polaroid land camera. So we're talking late 60s, early 70s, when this is the first instant photography, where you would literally shake it like a Polaroid. That's where it came from. And you'd put a fixative on the face of it, but it was instant photography. So these guys were going down to just have a fun weekend, and they invited Vernon. Vernon said, "No, I don't want to go down to Mexico with you guys." But he was he respected them. They were all good magicians. So they went down and they said, we got to make Vernon feel like he missed something down here. So they took a bartender who had a bunch of gold teeth and they posed him with a bunch of objects. So they put like coins between each of his fingertips and another coin between his thumbs, and they took a Polaroid of that. And then they put fans of cards between each of his fingers. So they said, yeah, this guy, he shuffled the deck, but he shuffled the deck into his other hand. And when he did this, it was 4 perfect fans, clubs, hearts, diamonds, and spades. And they were using these Polaroid photographs as proof. And Vernon was suspicious as he saw these, and he kind of smelled a rat as he was hearing this. But then the very last one, the guy had rubber bands stretched all over his fingers. And so Vernon asked about that one. He said, what's that? What's he doing there? And they said, oh, so they're each trying to kind of top each other with the impossibility of what they're describing. He says, this was unbelievable. He had everybody clear their drinks off the bar. He shot a rubber band down to the end of the bar. It landed at the end of the bar, but then it stood up and it rolled back to his hand. And that was it. Vernon asked a million questions about it, and they realized, oh, this is the thing he's fascinated in. So Charlie Miller wrote a column for kind of a magician's trade magazine called Genie, and he wrote a column in it called Magicana, and in it he retold this story, recounted the story. And I, as a kid, read that and thought, oh, I want to do that. And I had shot rubber bands, 13, 14 years old. We all had shot rubber bands a million different ways. And I figured out a way to do that. So one of the kind of entree things I did at the castle when I met Vernon, when I met Charlie, was to do that for them. And I handled it so it looked like I was just throwing a rubber band out, and then it would land on its edge and roll back to my hand. And the great story of the castle was when you just walk into the Magic Castle, this great private club for magicians that outside guests you can get a pass and go and have a meal and watch some magic shows. But it's mainly kind of like a friars club for just magicians originally. So there's a staircase going up when you walk into the foyer. There's kind of a sitting area and a big bar, but then to your right, as you come right in, there's a staircase that kind of makes a turn and goes up. And Vernon always sat in the corner, kind of facing that. That was his spot, the Vernon corner. So when I went over and met the professor, I said, I have something I'd like to show you. And when I shot the band, I intended to just have it land at the base of the steps and roll back to me. But that bottom level of the staircase was about 4 or 5 steps high. So it landed on the kind of little platform where you make the turn. And it rolled down the steps, across the carpet, up my arm, and landed in my pocket.
Come on.
Yeah. And the professor said, do it again. Do it again. Do it again. I said, no. Once is enough. Once is enough. Right? You have to know when to stop. Right? But that was it. That was, you don't need to do anything else, right?
I didn't know you actually created the technique. Well, that day.
And let me say that other people figured out different ways to do it. A guy named Dan Garrett came up with a really clever way to do it.
No, it wasn't Dan Garrett. It was some like Australian guy or something.
Oh,
I think
yeah, I
it
don't
was
know.
in like a bunch of, but I think it was pretty much similar to this technique you showed me. But anyways,
It might be.
but that day, this is a little story for you. That day, because I was so appreciative, you would show me things, and I just felt like, well, he thinks I'm a magician. He's not. I deserve to see this, and I just appreciated it. And you said to me, you said, Brad, I'm coming up with a new book, and I really want to do stuff that's kind of like just impromptu.
Yep.
So it's basically want to be dealing with impromptu magic, and basically it's stuff that you can find around in the very little setup, if anything. And so if you have anything you'd like to submit, let
Or
me know
share.
and
Yeah.
share it with me. And if I think it's something that I could use, I'll put it in your book. And I said, oh, thank you very much. Then you vanish into the netherworlds and I don't see you for 5 more years. And, but I remember thinking, and again, I'm just, I hope it's a compliment, but I've always respected you so much. I thought to myself, holy smoke, I got to come up with some because I want to be in a Michael Weber book. Are you kidding me? This is because for those watching, there's not a lot you can get in magic other than to be credited with creating something. That's the one little accolade you get. It's a gentleman's agreement that you always give credit to people when they came up with something. Oh, this
Sure.
comes from this guy's thing. This comes from that guy's thing.
Sure.
And we're all very familiar in this world of guys that have not done that. And so I wanted to be, in your book. And so I came up with some ideas. And what's really interesting, Michael, is I would come up with magic ideas in my head, not really do them. And I don't know if it's because I was lazy. I didn't know if it was because I was afraid if I tried them, they wouldn't work and I'd be disappointed. So I would just, in my mind, this is
That's all
perfect.
right.
It's
Right.
working right.
I get it.
But I came up with this idea for a trick, a number of them actually, for your book. And I never, I didn't see you for quite a while. I don't remember if I had your number at that time. It wasn't back in cell phone days. So I don't know why or how, but I probably was intimidated, like, I'm not going to show him. This is probably dumb. And that's Mike. He's probably got the best guys in the world giving him stuff. So I come up with this thing, and one day I'm at Denny's across the street from Poppy Star in Newport Beach, and I'm with a guy that I used to hang out with, Ken Sands, and I decided he went to the bathroom. I'm going to rig up this thing, see if I can pull it off. I'm just decided to, because magicians would always do things for other magicians, and I never had the courage to do it. I was great with laymen, but I freeze up in front of magicians. I couldn't do it well. So I went ahead and pulled off the thing I had in my head for years. I just rigged it up. He comes back. I do the move. He's blown away. He's like, "Holy crap! How did you do?" I tell him what it was. I said this was one of the tricks I had for Michael Weber's book that never happened or whatever. And one day, your book shows up, Lifesavers, and I'm going, "Holy smoke! That's that book he was talking about." Back in the day but I didn't have this thing. So this guy, Ken, ends up telling this other magician named, I knew him as Greg Wilson. He now goes
Yeah.
by Gregor Wilson. Of course,
Yeah.
you know who I'm talking about. And he asked me, when he heard of this trick, he said, could I show this to Paul Harris? I'd like, because he's making some books. He did. And so, Art of Astonishment, book one, Vanish 5,000. It is a sugar packet that you take and you tear the top off and pour it in your hand and go like this, and it disappears, and there's no gimmick.
It's great.
And it ended up in a Paul Harris book, which was another quite
Yeah, it's great. Paul's
honorable
amazing.
thing.
Yeah.
But I was going to call it Vanquishing Vernay was the name of that I was going to call it. And but because it ended up in the Greg Wilson section of the Harris book, he said, "No, I'm going to call it Vanish 5,000." I said, "Well, I guess if I'm getting in the book, he gets to do it." But again, simple little tiny story, but
Yep.
it was something I wanted you to know that little trick that, by the way, is now ended up in Magic for Dummies
Yeah.
and some other. It's become a standard for Greg.
I could have had it. It could have been me.
Could have been in your thing, but that was a trick that was
It's
that
great.
I invented to go in your book, because you
Oh,
said
that's
the
great.
day you
I
told
love
me
that.
the rubber band, and you said if you come up with something, I'll put you in my book, and
Yeah.
that was one of the tricks. So, anyways, I just have told people that over the years, and I said, I never told the guy that actually inspired that
Right.
whole.
Oh, that's funny.
So that's
And
how
to
that
just
is.
be clear, all I was saying was because you were always a creative guy, and you always had your own spin on stuff.
Yeah.
But my offer was if you had anything you wanted to put in it. I wasn't giving you a homework assignment. It was an invitation to be a part of it.
No, and I appreciate that. But like I said, I don't think you understand how much, that meant to somebody like me, because I never really
That's
thought
great.
I was that great. So it was important to me, and
Oh, that's nice.
it meant a lot to me. And I just wanted you to know
No,
that was
thank you very much
about
for
out of
telling me
your
that.
inspiration. Well, listen, I want to, just since because of the little glitch we had earlier, it's gotten to about an hour. So if you have a little bit more time, I
Sure.
want to I want to move a little bit now into something that I think will be even equally important to people watching, and that is what you've become outside of just magic is this creative innovator. You are in Florida right
Yeah,
now because you're consulting with a major, I guess, amusement park. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it or whatever. I don't
it's
want
for the new Universal theme park.
Okay, so I'm assuming that they are asking your thoughts on creating some kind of effect or illusion or something, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
there's a lot of it's for their they've created many Harry Potter inspired experiences in their other parks, and this is another one that they're it's kind of two Harry Potter related stories, areas, experiences in one. So part of it is the turn of the century Paris um, land that you see in the Fantastic Beasts movie, and then there's a kind of a magical uh, mode of transportation that takes you to London to the Ministry of Magic. So it's kind of two lands in one. And of course, being Harry Potter, there's lots and lots of magic. So I designed some illusions for them, and today was 11 hours of teaching some of the performers that'll be in there how
Oh, so this
to
is
do.
live. This is not just like they're on a trolley
No,
and
no, no.
something is happening.
This is live events. Well, there's some things that are there's some things that are experiences that will happen independent of a magician. There are some magical experiences, but one of the great things about uh, magic related to theater is it's at its best when the magic is functional, where we know where it comes from, where we know what its limits are, right? So now it can be dramatic, and now we understand why magic is being used to accomplish something as a tool, as a means of accomplishing something, right? One character maybe is a great sword fighter, and another character has a terrific memory, and one of the characters is a magician. So they're not doing it just demonstratively; they're using it to achieve a function. And in all of the J.K. Rowling stories, and in these two parts of the theme park, which is a much larger theme park with many different areas, all of the magic that happens is functional magic. It's to overcome an obstacle or to achieve something one of the characters wants.
But it's not like these are characters walking around doing this for the public. It's part of maybe a traumatic play or
They're
something that's happening that
live
they're watching.
shows. They're live, they're live shows. Yeah, there are live shows that happen.
Okay.
Rosie, up your back. You froze for a second. Frog. But yeah, they've done something remarkable, and in addition to lots of state of the art rides or experiences in many of the lands, they've also got live shows in a couple of the lands, and this is a multi-million dollar.
Yeah.
This is a big, big, big. People have not seen a themed show like this before in an amusement park.
So is it stuff that they kind of said, here's what's happening in the Harry Potter world, and so I need you to be able to, make this thing float or make that
Yep,
explode, or they're
it's a
just
combination of things. So I think I've been on this job about 4 years. So when it first came around, they were looking for a solution to a particular problem. There was a magical thing that happened in the films, but in the films it was always done with digital effects. And they said we need to be able to do this live in the park with real people 24 times a day. So we kind of went around, and I developed actually a new technique, an illusion technique, so that in real time people are getting to see something that was a digital effect in the film. So that's kind of exciting to
yeah.
work backwards and um, make a thing that is special effects magic and make it real magic again. And then while we were working together, the team that's working on it, the creative team, is really good. They're very smart. They've got really great design sense. They've got really good taste. They're good writers. So just from that interaction, the relationship developed that. They then asked me to work with many other parts of the and that's when you talk at the very beginning about someone kind of being sub rosa or their name not out there, you haven't heard them. My experience has always been that's the way to get good work, is just to do good work, right? I mean, I'm sure you remember. I know it happens with comedy shows for you, with bookings. But if you think back to magic, the way you got more shows wasn't by advertising. The way you got more shows was by doing good shows,
Yeah.
right? And the people that got to see you then said, "Oh, you'll come to my event and do that,"
Yeah.
right? And that kind of grew. And maybe we would get smart in understanding that, oh yeah, after a really hot show, hang around and let people come talk to you and take a business card or hand out a business card, right? But I really think the best way to get more work is by doing good work.
So you were partnered with Ricky Jay, who's somebody I mentioned, and again, it's
Yeah.
somebody that maybe the name wouldn't necessarily come to mind for a lot of folks, but he was also an actor. He was in Boogie
Oh,
Nights
a
and a
lot of
lot of the
things.
David Mamet stuff. Quite a renaissance man, you know, in
Yeah,
the
a remarkable authority on the history of magic, wrote many history-related magic books, Learning Pigs and Fireproof Women, Extraordinary Exhibitions, Dice Deception, Bad Luck. He wrote many, many books, very successful books that were on the New York Times bestseller list, with history, right? Think about that. Really understood iconography, was a great poster collector, broadsides and playbills, early advertising. Loved extraordinary characters and unusual performers, people that would do the most unbelievable things as variety entertainment. He was really a champion of those people.
Yeah, I always loved that too. I family that have been in the carnival since the 60s. So I kind of grew up around
And
carnies.
I remember there was a period kind of early on when you moved from close up to stage where a lot of the stuff you were doing was like magic slash carny
It
stunts.
was. I don't know if you know this. I ended up one year in Holland, in Knott's Berry Farm. A guy named Chuck Burns hired me to go
I
perform.
know Chuck Burns, yeah, and his son is a great performer,
Yes.
Chipper.
And he had me come in. It was the sideshow.
Yeah,
I created this character. It's so funny. I created this character, sword swallowing razor blades and coming out, stringing blood's coming out, my tongue's falling out. Just crazy sideshow kind of stuff that I was doing almost pre Penn and Teller, like that was kind of stuff
yep,
that they had played
yep.
around with that, or Harry Anderson. And I created this character called Sato the Masochist. And I became this was I didn't expect to get off on this, but I created this whole character. You're talking about John Carney when he was doing that,
Yeah,
and I did the tricks, but the guy had this funny way of interacting with the audience. Anyways, I left. It was just something I was doing for the heck of it, just to see if I could do it. And I was a full-time comic, so I didn't really have time to keep it up. And he called me, "Will you come back next year? They loved you." It's like, I can't really do it. So I never went back. But years later, I get tracked down by one of the characters that
that's great.
would run there, and they'd slide on their knees and scare people. And I don't know if you ever been to the Halloween Haunt, but this guy literally says, "I found Sato." They had be I had become this mystery guy that showed
That's
up
so
this once
great.
a year and did this crazy act. But I was because I'm a comic. I was funny. I was interesting. I created this way out of the box. I can't explain it, what I was doing, because I kind of made it up as I went. And it became a full routine. But
But
they
just
would,
so we understand full circle here, this whole conversation began with you talk about me being behind the scenes and a mystery guy. But what we really end up with is that you do a thing once and disappear, and you become someone that's talked about, and they actually hunt you down, didn't know how to find you, right? You weren't advertising this at all. You just did it to create a thing. You enjoyed that and you moved on, and then they found you to bring you back to do it again.
and I never did. But what was weird was they would have like reunions and they would show clips and they would talk about Sato the Man. It was I never knew this was happening. It was just
It's
I
great.
became this weird I
Legend.
showed, anyways, but I don't even know how we got off on that, but I was thinking about Ricky because I have all those books you mentioned. I was just a
Sure.
fan. And even when he passed away and they were auctioning his effects, and I was looking at him thinking, man, I wonder if I can get one of those just because, I liked him, but
Sure.
I couldn't afford it. But one of the things that he was selling was a first edition Nightmare Alley
Oh, yeah.
book. And I'm going, wait a minute, and sure enough,
There you go.
I have a first edition Nightmare
Yep.
that I hunted down
Yeah, I did
because
too.
I thought it was such a cool movie, and I was probably,
It's a great book. It's so much. It's the original Powell movie is good, but it's the book is so Gresham knew magic. Gresham understood all that stuff.
Yes. Well, and I don't know if you know this. Do you know his wife, Joy? I don't know if you know this. You might. They got divorced. She moved to England, and she is a woman that ended up marrying C.S. Lewis.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yes.
Yep.
There is a famous.
So from Nightmare Alley to the Screw Tape Letters, right?
Can you believe that?
I know.
Yeah, when I found out that he wrote a book called A Grief Observed,
Yeah,
because she died of cancer, and this man was a legend. He was a genius. He wrote, Screw Tape
oh,
Letters and all that.
yeah,
And he was a bachelor his whole life, and this woman comes in, and he ends up falling for her, and
sure.
they are married for a few years, and he's the happiest he's ever been. An iconic man from one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, and wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. And Joy Grisham ends up marrying this guy, and when I found that out, I go, wait, not from Grisham, from my, I couldn't believe it, because it was my Christianity now combined with my sideshow magic
Right, right.
stories.
That's the connection. Yep.
How did this happen? But you
Didn't he also write a book on faith or something like that? He wrote many, many faith-based books.
many, yeah,
C.S. Lewis
Mere
did. Yeah.
Christianity,
Yeah, yes,
Screw
yes.
Tape
Yep.
Letters, Problem of Pain. No, no, no. This man
Yeah.
is maybe the greatest known Christian apologist of the 20th century, and was led to Christ by J.R. Tolkien.
There you go.
So they used to hang out there, called themselves the Inklings, and they used to hang out at this bar and read each other's stories. And that's the one that he first read the story of The Hobbit to
Yeah.
these guys. So again, just crazy stuff that I never knew was all
Those
connected.
connections. It's great.
But I brought up Ricky because you had a business with him, and you guys would design illusions even for film. I know that you did the wheelchair for um,
Forrest Gump for
Forrest
Lieutenant
Gump.
Dan.
And nowadays you think, well, just CGI it, but I guess I don't know if that
Well,
was
that film was one of the first big films that Industrial Light and Magic worked on, and they were responsible for so much of the placing Tom Hanks into that archival historical footage that anything that they could turn into a practical effect, they did. So the floating feather was part practical, part digital at the beginning and end of the film. The wheelchair, anytime you saw Lieutenant Dan in the chair, that was practical. When you saw him out of the chair, that was augmented digitally. But that's really kind of, for film, that's the best of all possible worlds, is blurring the line there where the story, first you want the story strong enough that you're not really kind of trying to analyze it and pixel poke and figure out what's going on, but also to just kind of blur all the lines of reality there, so that there's truly just no way to know what you're looking at, and you have to accept it as the reality within the story.
what is so of all the different, now you've been on lots of films, right?
Sure.
Numerous
Yeah.
ones. Is there anything you're specifically proud of that you created that you really feel like that was
I think the magic we put in The Illusionist with Ed Norton was very good. I think that stuff felt grounded and very magical. And there was actually, so we got to work with Neil Berger, who was both the screenwriter and the director on The Illusionist. And he came to us very early on. It was actually him watching Ricky perform The Orange Tree in one of his live shows in New York, Ricky Jay on the Stem. And when he saw The Orange Tree, he had read a short story by Stephen Milhauser called Eisenheim the Magician. And from the inspiration of Eisenheim's story that he read, like a 15-page story about a powerful magician who becomes a political threat to the crown, and then seeing Ricky do The Orange Tree, he kind of confabulated all of that in his head and wrote a fantastic screenplay. So all of the mystery and love story and stuff was Neil Berger's invention. And he came to us very early and said, here's what happens dramatically. Here's where the magic beats are, but here's the functions that the magic has to serve. So what was really nice about that was getting to collaborate with him to design that magic and to invent things that have never been done before to fit the character and to fit the story, so that the magic wasn't just demonstrative or performative. And there's lots and lots of stuff in that film.
So when you try, so I just want to talk a little bit about that, about creativity, though, since we've really spent a lot of time on magic because it's something we both enjoy and respect.
You can edit
But
it out.
but well, and it did, but it launched both of us in
Sure.
in our lives. I mean,
Yeah.
magic has launched so many people, from
Yep.
Johnny Carson to every, that you got
Dick
to get.
Cavett did magic. Johnny Carson did magic. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you think of creativity, what do do you have a technique? Do you have a formula that you go by when you're trying to overcome some idea? Do you have a way that you place some storyboard type thing? How do you
There's
go?
there's there's rules of thumb. There's guiding principles. I'll do all those things. I'll do storyboards. I'll do just sketching in booklets or something. But really, I want to kind of immerse myself in it. So I'll become very focused on whatever the problem or the opportunity or the story or the goal is. So I'll get kind of super into whatever that world is, and maybe I'll read or look at or think about or study lots of other things that are adjacent to it. There's always, like you were saying with the magic secrets, there's always weird stuff I'm carrying around in my head that I'm not looking for a place to use, but my sense is that someday that stuff will be useful. And then, since so much of this ends up being something that someone's going to interact with or an audience is going to be able to watch, I try and make a super janky, rough cardboard and duct tape model. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big. But for me, I know I don't know anything until I've made my first crummy model. And as great as you could be with a CAD CAM program, or as much as people can kind of visualize something mentally in 3 dimensions, there's stuff, there are secrets to be revealed, there are obstacles that will be understood better as soon as you're holding a thing that you can turn around and look at and interact with. So just for me, a thing I do all the time is get to the rough model stage as fast as possible, because it's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be right, but it will reveal itself to you lots of opportunities and lots of obstacles that you just can't imagine.
It makes me think about when I started out in magic, all I had was books. I mean, that's how ridiculous it is that even videos was kind of a novelty. I remember them coming in to play
Yeah.
video. And I think there was a bit of maybe a clash of ages.
Mindsets. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea of can you learn from a book or a video? And I know you've probably touched on this in other
Yeah.
interviews and so forth, but I have always said, and maybe it's just I'm a product of my times, nothing like a book.
No question.
Nothing
Because
like a book.
because it requires you to use your imagination to bring it in life off the page. And you're not going, no matter how careful you may be, you're not going to acquire any of the bad habits of
Yeah.
duplicating or imitating what you see.
But I think that this newer group of humans that we
Right.
have who aren't growing up so much with book reading, they have a lot of things sort of given to them and displayed to them on social, whatever. They haven't had to learn the abstract to try to read these words and discover. And with magic, it's so specific because if you're using a sleight of hand, that might say, take your third digit of your finger and hold it under here, and it's like, and you're literally going, wait, what? And you're trying to read and think. And I cannot tell you, and I know this has to be true with everyone, how many times I couldn't quite understand it. So I found my way of getting there. That wasn't
That's
exactly
better.
what they taught
No,
me.
that's better. Now it's you.
Yeah. But it also becomes something new. You almost come up with something fresh. I learned from that technique, Michael. Like I will do something, I'm practicing a card effect and I accidentally flip a card accidentally and it goes flying and usually, crap, I'm gonna put my cards together. I would never get upset by that because I always thought there's a move there. I mean,
Yeah.
I started learning that in the chaos, in continuity of what I was trying to create, there's actually something magic in there that I can
To be
find.
discovered. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think people really don't understand. That's why we talk about AI and whatever. I really think something will be lost in the human mind. I guess,
I don't, to me, AI doesn't replace anything. It's just another tool to add to the toolbox. It's just another tool. I think if you start relying on it for things that, you know, Like if a doctor is going to use a doctor right now can try and remember everything when he's examining a patient, right? Or he could use paper and pencil to make notes as it go along. But that might slow things down and break up the intimacy with it. So maybe he has an assistant who takes the notes. But maybe it's not going to, there's going to be too much explaining between that. So maybe he uses one of those old voice recorders, right? And we go from tiny cassette tapes to maybe something that's digital. And now maybe he's doing that on his iPhone. And now maybe he uses one, we're now 20 years ago when he's using a product like Dragon Naturally Speaking that could listen to that and then type it up. And now all AI has done is shorten that so that the physician can check someone out and just describe what he sees. And in real time, this is being recorded, it's being turned into text, and the system might actually be looking some things up and adding some footnotes to this when it hears key words talking about pancreas or talking about high blood sugar or talking about restricted blood flow. It can start to kind of footnote these. So when the doctor gets to this at the end of the day, now this is a real tool that he can start to interact with the information. But, I still think you need the human in there who's going to communicate and connect with the person to get them to talk about, right? Because the person doesn't come in and diagnose themselves. They come in and describe symptoms, and the doctor has to understand how to translate those symptoms into underlying causes.
Well, and I can't argue with the fact that obviously modern technology can speed up some processes, or obviously with computers, if they can
It's
quickly.
allowing us to have this conversation right now,
Yeah,
right?
no, you're right. No, I can't be a Luddite about this and then be inconsistent because so much of the technology I appreciate,
You
but
can.
I care about, God, this is
You're
so
you're
off.
you're no, you're a speciesist, right?
Yeah,
So you care about humans,
I
and
do.
you want to keep humans in the mix. You love humans, and you want to keep humans in the mix. And I agree.
Well,
I'm the same way.
why wouldn't we want to be in the mix since this other branch of reality we made?
I know.
It was us. It
I
couldn't
know.
have done that on its own. AI couldn't create AI. We had to do that.
Well,
So
but now,
yeah,
but
but there had to be and this is a perfect segue into the
the
final.
creationism, right?
Well, it's the idea that the singularity, the first move
Ray Kurzweil.
is the magic. And this is some, and I'm not going to just jump right into what you might have think was the obvious, because I'm a Christian, and I
Yeah.
don't, I've never asked you if I don't think you're a Christian, but I don't know if you have any kind of religious beliefs, philosophies. Do you have any kind of, only till I understand
No,
your
I'm not. Yeah,
perspective.
I'm not opposed to faith at all. I think of myself as a spiritual person. I think the stuff that I feel, the stuff that I don't connect with is the organized part of organized religion. I think as soon as it starts to become hierarchical and bureaucratic, and people start to come in and translate for you and tell you what a thing means, and tell you how that works, or tell you that all of these folks are going to go out on the crusade and save everybody by bringing a religion to you, or going to the islands and bringing your god to the natives. I think all of the stuff that makes me uncomfortable, and that I think produces the opposite effect of what grace is supposed to produce. That's the stuff that I'm not in love with.
And I'm not completely opposed to your perspective. I think that I
I'm
probably
not opposed to yours at all.
no.
For me,
What I'm getting at though is that what I love about Christianity, Michael, and I want you to understand something. I don't think a lot of people that aren't serious believers get. I'm talking about people like me who really have tried to go into this at the deepest level, and I have a challenge because I am a very well read, very much understander of how easily people can be manipulated because I
Sure,
was a magician.
sure.
I know cold reading. I know mental ism. I know how to manipulate. I understand hypnosis techniques and, manipulating emotional ideas and creating false impressions. So here I am as a believer who has to wrestle with the fraudulence that also has very much seeped into much religion over history, and as a man who believes and has seen the techniques
Sure.
of
Yeah, that stuff
magic.
has to jump out at you, right?
Yeah, it
Has to jump
does.
out at you.
So here's what I wanted to ask you, and it truly is a philosophical exploration. It's in no way trying to pin you down or gotcha at all. I'm curious
I
about your.
don't I don't think you could gotcha me. I
No,
really
and I'm
don't.
not. What I'm curious about is your mind, which I deeply respect, in your perspective. So here's one thing I found interesting. Magic. One of the people I find a little disingenuous is like the Penn and Tellers, the Jamie and Swisses, James Randys, who are all really good magicians and
Yeah,
very proficient. And Randy did some great stuff in exposing false people that were.
psychics. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, he was really good at that. He had he had some
Get
personal
issues. Yeah, he did have
issues
some
that
issues. He did. He did.
he was very much exonerated for, which I think was actually uh, erroneous, based on what other people told me. But anyways,
Yeah.
that's another thing. I'll leave him be. He's moved on. But here's what I'm curious about. All of them made a living as magicians, right? As sleight of hand artists, illusionists, leisure domain, conjurers,
Yeah. Yep.
whatever term you want
Yep.
to use.
Sure.
That function of art and a means by which one shows this phenomenon to elicit awe and intrigue from the audience wouldn't exist if there wasn't the belief in the miraculous, because magic at its core counterfeits the miraculous. That's what makes it magic, but they don't believe it's magic. So what we're going to say is, listen, we're very ethical. We don't need God for ethics. We're going to tell you, we're going to trick you, but we're still going to do it by giving the illusion, no pun intended, of
I don't
the
think that's a
miraculous.
pun. I think that's
Well,
a use of the word illusion. No, but
okay,
okay,
but
so
what
I
I'm
understand what you're saying.
but
I'm gonna,
help me
yeah,
unravel.
unpack it. Yeah, I can't, they really have to speak for themselves. I met Randy once, and at that time, he was very, very nice to me, but things I didn't learn firsthand, but stuff I learned afterwards that I believe to be true. I think he had some problems,
Yeah,
and it's hard to reconcile that. I also think that I do not adhere to or agree with what his definition of a skeptic was, or the role of a skeptic. If you go back to the original Greek skeptos, it just meant someone that was eager to learn. That's all it meant. It was about curiosity. It wasn't about disbelief. It wasn't about trying to pick something apart and being critical. It was just about a curiosity.
yeah,
So that if someone presented the truth to you, think back to the allegory of the cave, right? The main character in that is someone who was curious about the movement of these images on the wall that turned out to be shadows, and explored it, not to dismiss them or prove what they were or weren't, but just to understand more, and then discovered that there was something else, there was something physical that these were the manifestation of, right? There were actually people that were causing these shadows. So what you were looking at wasn't the thing, it was a byproduct of
yeah.
a thing. And it was a kind of skepticism, right? I don't think that's all there is. I think there's something more, curiosity of wanting to learn, that revealed that to the character. So I can't speak for Penn or for Teller or for Jamie or for any of those folks, but I can speak for me and say that I think that there's a lot. If I was going to accept any responsibility for having an opinion about how other people should live their lives, I would not start with beliefs. I'd be working on things like diet and kindness towards others, and how we treat animals and how we treat children and how people who have more should treat people who have less. That stuff is going to be much more fundamental in terms of the things I'm going to start sharing my opinion about. But I'm much more interested. My belief has always been, I really don't care what someone tells me they believe. I care how they act.
Yeah.
That's all you can tell me that you murder in your sleep. But if I find out that that's just a fantasy world that you have, or that you just like to say that to get a shock out of, to get a rise out of people, that's fine, right? But if you tell me you're some great person and you help put people out of their pain and suffering, but you're actually, one of those angel of mercy people who's walking around deciding when people ever die, but I kind of don't love that so much. So for me, it's not what you say, it's what you do. I've always, my impression, my understanding, my connection to a person is in their actions.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot like your words, but so what? That's
But
just opinion.
it's an interesting thing. The more that I have learned, and I'm just being honest with you, like really as a friend, even though we're being watched by thousands
Sure,
of people, but that's what makes these conversations authentic, because it's really two
sure,
people just deciding, if you all want to listen in, be my guest, but I'm actually care about these answers.
sure.
And this is kind of the point that I think I'm making, and what you've said, and here's why I agree with virtually everything you said, is because it's Christian. It's Christian constructs. I mean, that's what the West has a hard time with, is understanding is what we consider ethical virtues that are innate in us humanly isn't. So these ideas did not exist in cultures prior to Jesus. This idea of loving some guy that's on the side of the road that isn't part of my family, that didn't exist in Roman times. There was no sense of human dignity. If you were a slave, that's how it works. You're a slave. Nobody cares. I rape boys and have sex with boys, and I have a wife for my babies. It was a different world. And here comes this guy that says, no, this isn't how it works. God has a better plan, a deeper plan, a sacred way that this marriage is supposed to work. Wait a minute. No, no, no. I have lots of women and I have my thing. Nope. It's a different. It was so absurd to these people, as far as everything that every culture had ever done prior to that it either should have been discarded immediately as fanaticism, or what happened, something took place. And so when you were talking about, I care about what you do, well, this is what the Bible says all the time. God judges your heart. I can tell you I'm a Christian all day long, but
Right.
if I'm acting, evil and duplicitous, and I'm
Yep.
stealing from you, and I'm not a person of honor, you're going, well, either Christianity is a bunch of crap, or you're not doing a good job at it, because I don't see any fruit in this labor of yours. And so I think that, I was not, by the way, when I brought up Jamie and Swiss or Penn and Toe, it wasn't to disparage them.
No,
I
no,
would
no.
love to
I
have,
don't think that at all. No, I think that they're a great example of some of the best known names in skepticism. And I've always joked with Penn that I'm no more comfortable with his approach to organized religion than anyone else's, because I've always called him a fundamentalist atheist. Right?
well,
He's
he is.
he's
He's
right.
he's an
He's
evangelist for atheism.
evangelical atheist. He
He
really
is,
is.
and he is, and I would love to have a conversation. I'd love to have I want to have a whole section of atheists,
Just
not to talk about these
Yeah, yeah,
ideas.
yeah. I'll bet if you called him up or reached out to him, he'd love to speak with you. He's a really smart guy. I don't agree with everything he says or thinks or even does, but he's a very, very smart guy.
Well, I'm
And
just curious how people function as humans. I'm very interested in, where do they find their ethics? Why do they think ethics matter? Where do they think morality comes from? I mean, all the transcendence that people of his ilk normally say doesn't exist. And then I say, but by your fruit, it doesn't seem consistent, because you can't continue to act as though life has meaning, that there is teleos, and then claim that they're, that you're a nihilist, or there is no absolutes, but yet you live your life as though it has
yeah,
purpose.
you're gonna have to have that conversation with him. But I mean, I can have that conversation with you about what I think. And
That's what
I
I
am
want to know.
I am
I
I
want
am
to
not a
know.
fan of I am not a fan of certainty. I think certainty, even facts, and I'm not talking the current political state we're in, even things that are understood to be the most fundamental factual things can change with time and experience, right? So what is a fundamental fact can change.
Yeah.
Things can grow, things can develop, things can change. I
Are you talking about
promise
like
you,
in our knowledge that becomes more
or
robust?
things can change in the world. I promise you, when I learned this through magic, that the egg that we get today from a chicken, because of all the things we've done to chickens over time, and just because of history, it's different from the way eggs were in 1584. Because
Okay.
in 1584, you used to be able to write on the outside of an eggshell and have the writing appear on the inside of an egg. And everybody, that was written in a book in 1584, and everybody has copied that since then, but nobody's tried it since then, right? With a potion made of gales, which is kind of a hard stone or a nut from a tree that produces an ink-like um, mixture and coloration. You used to be able to write on an eggshell so that you could then magically break a hard-boiled egg open, and written on the egg and possibly inside the shell was a message, the name of a card, something like that. Um, and as a kid, I tried to do it and tried to do it and tried to Scarny on card tricks, and I just could not. I couldn't even get the slightest blue smudge. And I started to work backwards, looking at every element of it. Did vinegar change? Did ink change? I think over time, the cuticle of an eggshell has changed. So being able to do that was a fact at one time, and things have changed where that's no longer a fact. If you go through those same steps again of that same recipe, you cannot produce the same result, because things around us have changed, developed, progressed,
So tell
morphed.
me, I understand what you're saying. I think that's obviously a legitimate point, but tell me if you can, again, I'm just wanting your perspective
Sure.
about the idea of the miraculous. In other words, without at least
No,
that.
we'll go. No. I like the idea that might have been a model for magic, but I'll bet if we were to go back anthropologically, there were people performing ritualistic behaviors, magical behaviors, in the hopes that it would produce a result. It's like, oh yeah, you know what? The last 3 times I stood in the cave with my right foot off the floor, it rained within the next 2 days. Humans are pattern makers, and patterns will connect those in our mind, right? We're looking for the pattern in that. So that can produce ritualistic behavior, because we think that certain inputs, certain things we do or refrain from doing, we're going to, ritualistically, if I plant corn and fish, if I plant a fish as an offering with corn seeds, I'm going to get a bigger crop. Not because I made an offering to the Kachina gods, right, to the corn gods, but because I put nutrients in there, right? I put proteins in there. I put fish oil in there. So there's a belief aspect to that, but there's also a chemical aspect to
Yeah.
that makes that stuff work. But I think that when you were talking about, without real religious miracles, we wouldn't have a foundation for our pretend
Well,
magical
just the idea of a
miracles.
miracle that it has enough weight that
To get talked
we
about and put in a book.
that and that we respond to it.
Yeah.
We nobody. If I stand in front of you and say, close your hand, open it, and there's a little bird, you don't have to think, I wonder how I should react. You go, it's awe-inspiring, awe as in awesome. Something takes
I
your
I
breath
think
away.
I think sociologically, there I think the response to magical events is learned. Because for a child, everything is, to have a magical event, you have to have an expectation. So for me, magic, a great definition of magic is take a film, an old style 16 millimeter film of any natural event, and cut the frame out that is the link between the input and the output. So what I'm removing is the everyday common methodology of how a thing happens, right? So What's a simple version? I take an ink pen and I take off the cap and I dip it in a glass of water, and now suddenly the water turns blue, right? But now what I'm going to do is cut out the frames where I dip the pen in the water. So now I show you a pen and I pull the cap off, and now I see the water turn blue. That's magical because there's a break between our understanding of cause and effect. And if you look at all theatrical magic tricks, all entertainment-based magic tricks, almost all of them, we are using secret techniques, psychology, technology, methodology to conceal the actual means of accomplishing the result, right? The card ends up in my wallet, but I didn't see him put it there. All that is a guy taking the card, putting it in his wallet, putting it in his pocket, and then you cut those frames out, right? So all of this is just a matter of a train of thought, of basic logic. But all of our basic logic is sociological and is learned, because we know very early on with object permanence and things like that, if that stuff isn't taught culturally, that either everything is magical and surprising or nothing is magical and surprising, right? You have to be socialized enough to have expectation, because the expectation is understanding that when I see you take a pen out, I now am projecting into what you might be doing with this. And when I see inputs that don't match up with the resulting outputs, that gap in it is what creates a sense of wonder, or what we can then reframe as a sense of magic.
Well, okay, I see what you mean, that we are, if we're missing a piece of the puzzle, it doesn't seem to be.
Our job as a magician is to conceal a piece of the puzzle. But even before we get to that part, we have to have an expectation of where a thing starts and where it ends, right?
Yeah.
This chain of events. Because, let me say that, imagine I took a piece of raw meat and put it in a box, and it didn't go bad. It did not go bad for 4 weeks. That's a magic trick. But if I understand that that box is a refrigerator, right? Now I'm understanding something more about the underlying inputs and resulting outputs and the cause and effect, right? So the magician's job is to make it just look like a box, right? And the fact that you don't know that there's coolant and air moving around and refrigerant and electricity or all of those things. Now what we've done is we've turned an everyday appliance into a magic box.
Yes.
And that's one of the funny places we are right now with there's a big boom in magic using a smartphone, right?
Yeah.
And there's a couple of people very clever, like my favorite is a guy named Mark Kirstein out of England. And he's just a genius designer because he understands that his approach to it is to make the use of the phone look incidental. It's not the place where the magic happens. It's not the place, it's not the means by which the magic is brought about, but it's used as a natural tool. So maybe you'll look up a word on Wikipedia, or maybe you'll do a simple math problem on your phone on the calculator, right? But secretly in the background, he's got lots of clever stuff happening. So we're using it in a way we ordinarily use it, to take a photograph, to look up an ad, to record our voice. But there's a much larger school of guys who are finding a thing that the technology does and then presenting it as if it's magical. The way overquoted statement of Arthur C. Clarke that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. We're at the point now with this magic thing that we carry around in our pocket all the time, that now any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from advanced technology, right? If I show you a miracle with a phone, and it might be I know this is true. I unintentionally did this to a guy, to a science writer once, who was trying to find these imagined links between science and magic. And I showed him a thing that was a flat out magic trick, but looks like technology. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know that was possible." And I said, "It's not. That was a complete magic trick, right? So this is the opposite, right? Good magic is indistinguishable from advanced technology, right? It's not technology at all. But we're now so acclimated to, socialized to advanced technology I'm going to tell you three things about this phone and the one you've got right there. I can put an object on the screen and it's sensitive enough that there's an app that will act as a scale. I can plug a set of headphones into this and it will work like a stethoscope, so a doctor can use it. And I can also hook it up with an app where I say something and then it will kick something out. It'll kick out a version of what I just described. The first two things are real. The third thing I just made up off the top of my head. But all three of those sound equally possible and impossible, right? But we've just become so acclimated with the advancements possible with this little supercomputer in our pocket that it's very hard for us to be surprised with the next thing that this does. It's very hard to make this feel like a magical object anymore, because that line I talked about, that chain of anticipatory events, we've seen it do so many things that we couldn't imagine, and we know that we can really do it. We're getting to the place where it's kind of hard to it's very difficult to be mysterious with the open use of technology, because the level of our technology has felt so magical for so long that it's not magic anymore. It's just technology.
Yeah. I think, though, that again, what you said is true, and I understand it. I think the nuance, though, that I just am curious about is, for example, you take a Sam Harris. I don't know if you follow any of these guys, but he's a determinist. So he believes that our brains are wired and determined to behave in a certain way, and we're like a hard drive,
Yeah.
right? And it's already been pre-programmed. So what I would say to someone like that, here's what I'm curious about. If that is true, A, how would you discover it? Because why would it tell you it's programmed? Wouldn't it keep it to itself? And two, if you did discover it, then why doesn't that then cause you to, if you are consistent as a person who's supposedly scientific oriented, not write books, not try to convince people, because you have no option. You have to
Right,
think that way.
right,
And
right,
by the
right.
way, I disagree with you, which means I have no option. You're not going to convince me of your God, and you're not going to not convince me because I can't help it. I've been programmed. I've
Right, I
been
get it.
programmed. I'm
I get it. I get it.
determined. So
Right.
if that's the case, shut up, go live your life, eat, drink, and be merry, but don't pretend that you are trying to illuminate and give me revelation so that we can, as a species, move beyond this absurdity of religion and move to just ethics and pure, moral principles based on just being a good person. It's like, no, you're kidding yourself. And I'm not going to allow you to lie to me and yourself and act as though you're the superior one intellectually, because it's inconsistent. If I'm aware of it, I should at least have the acknowledgement to say, I'm not going to try to teach you anything anymore because there's nothing to teach. I'm stuck. Also, you would have to say that my love for my wife and my children is chemically induced. It isn't real. There is no transcendent idea of love. But even if I knew that, I would long for it. I wouldn't want to disperse it. I wouldn't want to eliminate it. I
Sure.
would feel broken and
Sad.
great
Yep. Yeah.
anxiety that,
Yeah.
are you telling me I don't love my son? I don't love my wife. It's just a chemical response. It's like LSD. I'm tripping on this because you have ruined everything that gives me humanness that I want, that I've made a commitment to a human, and we connected spiritually. And when you talk about the technology of the phone, and you're right, I don't know how this works, so it is magic to me. But that's a whole different thing when it's contained within the process of technology, where it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a materialistic process. That is
Sure.
transcendent. That's not the same as floating. That's not the same as looking at a sunset and being in awe instead of having the
No,
courage.
I think awe is a different thing. I think awe is something that the state of awe can, and there's a really great book that's called Awe that has lots of religious um, analysis in it about religious awe, but also just kind of naturalistic awe in it. And that's the goal, is to magically is to give someone, to share an experience with someone that moves beyond intellectual analysis, right?
Yeah.
Where it's overwhelming and good and pleasurable, and maybe makes you feel connected to something bigger, whatever definition you have that, right?
But
Even
that's
if for you,
exactly.
even if that's nature, even if that's God, whatever that is, that you have that feeling, but it's that feeling absent the mental, oh, I know I'm feeling this because XYZ.
But
The
but
one other
but
thing to say, look, with Sam Harrison and all of these other guys, I think they're the ones to talk about their stuff, because I'm not a determinist. I think there's free will. And I would say one of the kind of things I hear, and this might be more the organized part of the religion than the actual religion itself, but I I think it is unfortunate that everyone doesn't treat what we have right now, every moment, every breath, every heartbeat, every problem, every benefit, all of it, um, like it's special and rare and finite. Because I don't think that if there's more beyond, what harm could, as long as you've got all your beliefs lined up the right way, and you're being consistent internally and externally, what harm can come from treating all of this as precious, like there might not be something after it?
No, no harm. As a matter of fact, I don't think you can function if you don't. But what my response to that would be this: when it comes in, and we'll wrap this up because I know it's getting late for both of us, and I appreciate your time.
No,
I
no,
think
it's fine.
I would think what I would say is this, though, Mike, is that the one piece of the puzzle that I think is missing is we want the miraculous. We want it to be real. That's why magic works. I want to think maybe, maybe there's something else. And that's innate in the human. I don't think your job as a magician, as an illusionist, as
Yeah.
a fantasy dream maker would matter and have any validity or any interest if I didn't think, even want to pretend there's something more. There's something about humans that that's now, if you want to say that's programmed to keep us in
No,
survival.
no, 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 no. But let me just say, is there anything any different from great writers who do that, who take us to other lands and make us imagine more and dream about more,
No, but
and
it's
great
but that
filmmakers?
but you're talking about the function of the formula. I'm talking about going beyond that as to the undergirding of all of that magic and dream is because there's something beyond the material world that actually exists. That would be my response. As a magician,
No, no,
former
no.
magician.
It's absolutely clear to me that there's something about humans in general, that of maybe a majority of the population has some sort of mental connection to the notion of something beyond and the miraculous. I agree with that. But I don't think that's historical. I think that's
No,
with
I think that
humans.
I think that that as it actually is probably the single most true part of the human, from the most primitive to the most advanced, is people have never stopped believing in God. Now, yeah, there's atheists, but that's actually always been a little bit more of the maverick. I mean, people have always believed. Now, you could say, well, yeah, they didn't know science. They saw lightning. They thought it was the gods getting angry.
Sure.
But my point is that you would think then, if that were true, we have reached a place in technology to say, all right, I get it. There's no God. Let's just move on. And we don't. We don't. And what I'm trying to get, I'm not even trying to convince you about God, though obviously I believe in him and I would love for you to think that because I think it's true. But I think that there is something about us that in the magic that and the clues are given in the sunset and in the mountain range. Because if you're a true materialist, I should look at mountains and go, look at that giant pile of dirt. Isn't that amazing with the ice crystals on it and the calcium deposits? Aren't those something? And look at that sunset. Isn't that beautiful? No, no, no. That's just light refraction through the smog
Moisture. Yep.
particles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that, and I'm saying, but they don't do that. The atheist gets teary-eyed as well, and it's
Sure.
just a chemical reaction. So, are you also getting teary at a vinegar and baking soda bubbling? Because that's all it is. But we know there's something. I'm just telling you. I think that's the clue, Michael. I what I'm wrapping this whole thing up with is
Yeah.
what you do for a living to
The reason,
counterfeit.
so what your suggestion is that your insight is that part of the reason people's reaction, response, and hunger for theatrical wonder is rooted in something religious and fundamental and faith-based.
Because it's real. And you're just replicating it in a contained formulaic counterfeit way. You're not doing it
Just like,
maliciousness. Want them to enjoy it. You're not trying to fool them or steal their money or con them, but you're giving them an experience that they long for. Otherwise, it'd be absurd. Hey, you want to go listen to the beautiful orchestra? Yeah, I hear music. It's beautiful. Hey, you want to go watch the play and get some pathos on this man going through the difficulty of his sons not loving him the way he should and have a death as a salesman? You want to go experience life because we've all, yeah, we can do that. Hey, you want to go to this thing where they pretend like a guy's floating in the air?
but
Why would I do
hang
that?
on, hang on. Isn't there an enormous part of the population, whether it's really true or not, that will tell you, "No, I don't like being fooled." And remember, the 1950s advertisement for Adam's Magic that you talked about earlier was, "It's fun to be fooled," right? But they were selling you on that, right? They weren't saying it's fun for you to be fooled. It's fun for you
Yeah.
to do magic and your friends are going to enjoy it, right? And a lot of people clearly feel intellectually threatened by seeing a thing that feels like it's working in between their layers of understanding. And even you discussed earlier, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm just adding other thoughts to it, not necessarily contradictory, but unspoken ones so far, that you said there was something, an earlier version of you, when you saw a magic effect, there was something hungry in you to understand more of that. Not to defeat it, not to kill the wonder for yourself, but you were interested in collecting more ways to bring about these possibilities. But it was not fun to be fooled. It was fun to see a thing that you might then be able to bring into yourself. So I think your observation is an interesting one. I think there's lots of great examples historically and sociologically to support that being true much of the time, but I don't think it's the only answer. And
Well, there's always going to be more ways to see things and
yeah,
to examine them, and that's part of also what makes another clue for me of what makes God real is that He made humans inquisitive, that we actually contemplate these ideas that
yes,
we are not like animals, and God bless animals, but they don't. I mean, I did a whole comedy routine about they're not sitting around contemplating us. That's what makes us different. They have feelings and they're good things, but they don't have retrospective. They don't wonder about
I think we're just better at cooking other animals. If
Yes, right.
any of them got good at catching and cooking us,
No,
right? Like, so
no,
what are we afraid of? We're afraid of sharks, right?
yeah,
We're afraid of sharks because they're a lot better at turning us into swimmer into a meal, right?
that's right.
Right? We don't like tigers because that's usually going to end up as a snack for the tiger. So I really think it has to do with food chain. But I appreciate what you're saying philosophically.
Well, I'm going to let you go, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm going to ask you
No, I
all
love
one
you,
more
man. This is
question.
great.
I have my subscribers. Hey, I'll have you back on. We'll do it. We'll talk about more things. But I have subscribers, so I always have a special bonus question just for them. So I'm going to ask you this, and I'm kind of rolling the dice, that people will come on that are also Magic fans. Your name will certainly draw
Sure.
those
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah.
But I also hope that it was just giving people a little bit of behind the scenes about this odd art form that isn't not everybody doesn't understand.
No, and I'm really interested in the connection you see in it. I have always, you're talking about working creativity. I've always believed that curiosity is the opposite of fear,
Hmm,
right? One guy, Joseph Campbell, said that the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear most,
hmm,
right? That it's the thing we haven't found yet is in the place we haven't looked yet, and the
okay.
reason we didn't look there is there's something keeping us away from it. Um, so so I am curious. So I'm happy to talk to people that have really strong beliefs about anything. About I I've read the Bible cover to cover. I've read the Quran cover to cover. I've read the Book of Urantia. That's a good one. I've read the Book of Mormon because I think it's important. I don't think anyone. I don't think it makes sense to decide on a life view if you've got all these other groups that have an equally powerful and deeply held conviction and connection to it until you look at that. And reading all of them, I connected with pieces of things. And from the Joseph Campbell, you know, socio religious part of it, it's amazing how many times in different cultures and throughout history, these same kinds of um, foundation stories, right? That the same kind of flavor rises place and place. And what does that mean? Maybe it just means that this group was standing in a different place, or they didn't experience the story, but when it was told to them, it was told through some different sociological filter, and everybody's talking about the same guy or the same thing. I don't think there's an answer to that in totality that we're going to be able to
No, and
undo.
and I
But
also believe that, God sort of, yeah, there are other religions out there, and he probably tries to sort of draw them in by giving them pieces of the elements. And here's the thing, and I'm talking magician to magician right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, the one thing that is unique is Jesus. There's never been a guy like that in history.
Yep.
No one has affected the world
Yes, no
like
question.
him. No, and he's historically real. He really existed. You don't have to believe he's God, but he wasn't Zeus. He wasn't
No,
pretend.
no, no, I understand.
He was
I get
real.
it.
He really was crucified. They all know that. And all of his disciples ended up going to their deaths saying, this guy came back to life. I don't know what to tell you. They had nothing to gain. There was no money. There was, oh yeah, you religious are all about, controlling people. It's like there was nothing to control. They lost everything for one reason. The guy came back to life. I'm telling you, you got to hear this story. And of course, he did miraculous things. And as magicians, we know that the things he did would have
Yeah,
been
there's the what
impossible.
is the didn't Smith write Jesus the Magician?
I don't know, but I know Andre Cole became a Christian because of his trying to discover how this guy did this in ancient, Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. It's like there's no way he could have. He
He's a
need a
very
couple
Andre was a
semis.
very sweet guy.
He
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
was.
wouldn't.
He was a great guy, yeah. Well, here's my last question for you. So I did. You asked me to do see one of your podcasts just to get a flavor for what you're all about, and I did. I don't know if I found the one you were telling me I was looking for, but I did find a few other ones. But I heard one thing and it was interesting to me, so I'm going to just wrap it up with this.
Sure.
You talked about Ricky Jay. I'm going to come to him because I was a fan. And you said something interesting. It said, I guess on your 50th birthday, he gave you a special gift,
Yeah.
which was a plaque or some sort of
No,
certificate,
it was a yeah, beautifully hand calligraphed
and
document.
basically said, you have reached a point, sensei, right, or where
It
you,
was it said no holds.
oh,
It said no holds. And the notion behind it was it was what we talked about earlier in terms of the meritocracy
right,
of we always kept secrets. We would share a lot,
yeah,
but there were always some things that we didn't talk about together. And he said, for my 50th birthday, he said, I think we've both reached a place now where anything of mine you want to know, all you need to do is ask. And if it's mine to share, I'll share it.
So that's my question to you. Obviously, if was there anything that he knew, or you maybe surmised he knew, that you did want to know? And did you ask him? Obviously, you don't have to tell me the answer, but
No, but I'll tell you that.
Hey guys, I'm interrupting my own interview. If you want the answer that you haven't heard yet, go to bradstein.com and join one of the 3 tiers. It is the militia of the mind, it is the warrior level, or it is the special forces. And then you'll get all kinds of special content and bonus answers to make you smarter than you could ever imagine. Go there now, jump on and join the Mighty 10,000.
folks, this has been Michael Weber. Look him up on the internet if he hasn't erased
Or
everything.
don't. No, I'm sure everything's erased. It doesn't. You don't have to look me up. Just read a good book and be nice to other people and help someone out.
Well, and watch the movies you were participating in. Go to this Universal eventually and know that.
Or not. Or just live a good life. And if you
Yeah,
happen to, if you
but
here's what's better for me. If you happen to come across any of this, I would much prefer that out of happenstance you end up someplace, and because of something I did, not knowing you, and me and you not knowing I did it, that it's a richer, enjoyable, awe-inspiring experience for you and the people you love and you're hanging out with. And I don't need my name on it, and you don't need to hunt me to go down and find it, because I'm making it for everybody. I'm not making it for people to hunt my name down. I'm just trying to make it better for everyone else.
Well, and you have done that throughout your career, and you're a kind and good man, and I'm proud to call you my friend.
Yeah, I love you,
And
man.
I will I'll continue to subtly massage your soul until you know that Jesus is God, so that you can join me in heaven. But in the meantime, thank you for coming on.
No,
Hopefully
my
we'll run. If
pleasure.
you're ever in Nashville, come look me up, brother.
I
And
will.
if I'm ever around where you are, I'd love to catch up to you folks. This is Michael Weber. I call him Mike. He is a man who seeks to be ethical and virtuous and kind and good, and we can all learn from that. But he also has done things that have been entertaining and interesting to people, and that's a good thing. And I have no reason to not let you know that he deserves some accolades for that. Folks, remember, the truth is what matters. We have to be truth tellers. We're living in a new world where that is hard to find. We don't know who to trust anymore, and that is not the way humans are supposed to be. So let's try to be the truth teller, stand up for what is right, even if you're the only one. If they ever say you're politically incorrect, I always say thank you for the compliment, because it's much more important to speak truth and to be the kid that says the emperor's naked than to pretend like you are and find out you're really too afraid to stand up for what is true. I am just a comic, was a magician, but
Always a
doing what I'm
magician.
supposed to
Always a
do.
magician and a comic. And now you're a teacher and a seeker of truth. And you've always been a good guy.
All right. Well, maybe it's like an alcoholic. I'll always be you're always an alcoholic. So I'm a magician too. But I am doing this. I am doing this. I'm doing what I'm called to do, which is put the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.